Hello everyone, I am Sleepy Shoreline and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to sleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Where are you from and what time are you watching? Now relax and unwind. It was Christmas Eve, 2001. I was 6 years old at the time. My parents had gone to the store in town to grab some last-minute supplies for Christmas. They'd left me in the barely capable hands of my older brother. I was downstairs in the living room watching some cartoons on TV, while he was upstairs in his room listening to metal. As I'm sitting there, watching Dexter's Lab, I caught something out of the corner of my eye. Passing by my living room window was a guy in a big, floppy red hat. He stopped at the window and looked in at me. It was a man, dressed up in a cheap Santa suit. He had the big, fake white beard and everything, even a large sack slung over his shoulder. Well, to my childish mind, this really was Santa paying me a visit. Still, even then, I knew something was off. What unsettled me about him as he stared in through the window at me were his eyes. He looked sickly and yellow, with dark bags hanging under them. His cheeks were sunken, and he didn't exactly look like the holly jolly jelly belly Santa I imagined growing up. He looked in at me for an uncomfortably long amount of time, and I looked back. Rather than be filled with joy, I just felt uncomfortable. But being so young, I didn't exactly know how to react. Santa was a good guy, right? While looking in, he motioned towards our front door, as if to say, "Let me in." I got up off the couch and walked into the hallway. I unlocked the door, but didn't touch the screen door in front of it like my parents had taught me. As such, there was still a thin layer between myself and the Santa now standing on my porch. Oh ho ho. Why hello there, little boy. Merry Christmas. And what's your name? Michael. I remember feeling confused that he didn't know my name. I always thought Santa knew every kid's name. Wasn't he supposed to have a list? Oh, nice to meet you, Michael. Do you know who I am? I nodded yes. Well, I've heard you've been a very good boy this year, so I brought you this. He dipped his hands into the sack and pulled out a wrapped present, held it out in front of him as if to say, "Come and get it." Being so young and naive, I was tempted to open the screen door and take the gift, but my parents had drilled stranger danger into me hard, to the point where I didn't even trust Santa Claus. All I could think to do was tell Santa that he had come too early and that he should come back at nighttime like he was supposed to. Put the present under our tree, you know. Come now, Michael. Open up and come and get your present. It's a doozy. The temptation was strong. I wanted the present, obviously. My imagination ran away with me, thinking about which new cool toy it could be. But I needed permission. I shouted up to my brother, "Daniel, come down here real quick." I'll never forget how that Santa's eyes widened as I shouted that upstairs. Without hesitation, he turned and walked away. He hopped into a van outside our house that still had its engine running. All I could think was, where are the reindeer? Within moments of getting in, he drove off down the road, never to be seen again. Not by me, at least. My brother hadn't even heard me shouting because of the metal he was blasting. When my parents came back, I told them about the Santa that came to visit. They thought I was just pretending or playing a game. A couple of days after Christmas, the news broke out. An 8-year-old boy in our town had disappeared from his house after his parents ran to the stores. They had only left him alone for 10 minutes. They never found him. My folks believed my story after that, and never left me alone with my brother again. I thank my lucky stars we had that screen door in my home. I have had my fair share of weird and scary incidents in my life, But this particular one stands out without any doubt. Because of this incident, every Christmas when someone gives me a present, my heart stops for a while, thinking I have to unwrap it. I was 10 years old, and it was the last Christmas I had with my cat, Pillow. Guessing from the name, I'm sure you have understood Pillow was a cute, furry cat. I wanted a pet dog, but we found Pillow on the pavement one day. So my mom and I brought him home to live with us. He was a very hyperactive cat, always running and chasing things around the house. I remember that Christmas, we saw the maximum snowfall in Rochester. So, it was Christmas Eve. I was having the traditional Christmas dinner with my family. There was stuffing, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, eggnog, ham, and fruitcake. I was eating as much as I could when the doorbell rang. Due to the heavy snowfall outside, our community had to cancel the neighborhood Christmas party. So it was a small celebration that resided in every individual's home. Hearing the doorbell, my dad got up to answer it. My mom and I kept eating and heard Dad opening the main door, then pausing for a while. Generally, we expect a conversation once you answer a door, but that didn't happen in this case. My dad didn't say a single thing for at least a minute or two, and then he closed the door abruptly. With this awkward silence, only Pillow growled, staring at the corridor. As my dad entered the living room, I noticed he had a present in his hands. A cardboard box wrapped with a shiny red gift wrapper and a green bow tied on top. The gift looked too Christmassy to me, if you get my meaning. My dad placed the box right in front of my plate and said, "Someone left you a Christmas gift, Peter. It seems like you have a secret friend." I was surprised, because I'd already exchanged presents with my friends a day ago, and there was no one else left to send me gifts amidst the snowstorm. There was a name card attached to the ribbon. It read, "Merry Christmas, Peter." "Well, open and take a look," my mom said with a smile. After opening it, I found a giant cookie jar looking like the head of a Grinch, filled with dark chocolate chip cookies. Like most of the kids, I never liked the Grinch. The weird-looking creature with a scary-ass smile always felt intimidating. The Grinch in the cookie jar had an even more disturbing smile than the movies, and its eyes were yellow with a black dot in them. The gaze was so off-putting that even my mom said, "This is an unusual gift. It looks so creepy. Who could have left it on our doorstep?" My dad replied, "I don't know. There was no one as far as I could see." She shrugged her shoulders and kept the cookie jar in the middle of the table. Even though I wouldn't say I liked it, I couldn't control myself from having a chocolate cookie. After finishing my dinner, I took a giant-sized cookie and went to bed, kissing my parents goodnight. I ate it while staring at the snowfall outside my window. I was shocked at how delicious this cookie was. The chocolate chips almost melted inside my mouth. Being happy and thankful for all the gifts, I got under my warm blanket for a night of deep sleep. I woke up feeling thirsty. Finding the jug empty, I got up to go to the kitchen. I was still in a state of drowsiness as I woke up abruptly. I was about to take the first step down the stairs when I saw a human figure sitting at the bottom of the stairs in a frog-like position and staring at me. I don't think I will ever forget the eyes. It was a pair of glowing yellow eyes on a filthy green face. It was the Grinch gazing at me. I almost shit my pants. Realizing this, and what happened next happened so quickly, I still fail to explain it adequately. The Grinch gave me a big, toothy smile and slowly stood up. I began to shake in fear, and before I could do anything, the Grinch figure started to climb the stairs at full speed, stretching his hands towards me. Ah! I screamed and ran towards my parents' bedroom. I could hear heavy footsteps rushing at me. As I bumped into their room, my parents woke up hearing the chaos. "What's going on? What happened, Peter?" He was behind me. He was real. I told my parents everything I experienced a few moments back and hugged my mom, sobbing aloud. My mom patted my back and my dad searched the entire house to assure me it was all a bad dream, a mere hallucination that tricked my mind. No one believed me as usual, and the matter escalated further. From that night, I started to avoid the Grinch head. I didn't eat one more cookie from that jar, so my mom gave it to the neighbor kids whenever they came over to play with me. A week went by, and the cookies were gone, leaving that empty jar resting on our table. I asked my mom if we could get rid of it, as it has no use now. She realized I was still scared. "Okay, take this and put it in the garage." I grabbed it immediately and ran to keep it in the garage, shoving it into a rusty shelf in the corner. I was coming back when I noticed a big cut in the palm of my right hand. Something sharp cut me deep and I was bleeding, but I didn't even realize. Drops of blood got smeared on the Grinch's face, making it look even scarier than before. I didn't say anything to anyone and ignored it. I was relieved that now I wouldn't have to see that ugly thing walking around the house. Nothing happened that night. The following day, I was helping my dad set up the fireplace when my eyes went to the table accidentally, and it was back where it was. The Grinch cookie jar was sitting in the middle of the table and staring at me as it did. "Who put it here?" Mom, why are you shouting, Peter? What's the matter?" I pointed at the jar and she stood there, completely clueless. "I didn't keep it there." "David, is it you? You know your son has a bad dream." Saying this, my mom picked it up and threw it in the trash. My dad said that he had nothing to do with this sudden incident. I believed him. Slowly but gradually, I started to understand this cookie jar was cursed. I watched my dad empty our trash in the bin outside that night. I was finally at peace that this jar would be gone in the morning. Only if I knew what horrible nightmare awaited me. I was sleeping in my room when I heard footsteps outside. I came out and saw my mom walking down the stairs in an unsettling way. Her long hair was dangling in the air, and her white nightgown swept the floor like a broom. Every step she took appeared a bit robotic to me. I followed her, and as we came downstairs, she stopped. I went in front of her and saw her face was extremely pale, and her eyes were closed. This was the first time I saw my mom sleepwalk. Mom? She then opened her eyes and looked at me. Her eyeballs looked the same as the Grinch on the cookie jar. She smiled terrifyingly and said, "Merry Christmas, Peter." She then grabbed her head with both hands and twisted it in one go. The crackling sound of her bones breaking still ring in my ears. What was beyond horrifying was even though her head had turned back completely, she still kept standing there. The smile on my mom's face didn't feel like her at all. Pillow jumped on her as she stretched her hands at me, and whatever was inside her did the same thing to Pillow as she did to herself a few moments back. Pillow whined in pain, and then got silenced forever. I screamed and fainted on the floor. When I woke up, I found myself lying on the hospital bed with my dad sitting next to me. He was in tears, and I knew why. I knew my mom was no more. Pillow was no more. It's all because of that cursed cookie jar. But what he told me shocked me like hell. My dad came down hearing my scream and found my mom laying on the edge of the stairs with her neck broken like a twig. Pillow was also found near her, dead. Somehow his neck got broken too. Doctors and cops think my mom fell down the stairs during a sleepwalking episode and somehow landed on my cat that accidentally killed it as well. For me, I was just a victim of a severe trauma, discovering my mom's and my cat's dead body altogether. The cookie jar went missing right after these deaths. It's been a long time now, and my dad has passed away as well. I currently live in Nebraska with my wife and daughter. I never told them about any of these incidents. They know the same thing as everyone else. It was all an unfortunate accident. But I know it was the Grinch on that cookie jar who stole my spirit of Christmas forever. If you enjoy knowing about scary and horrifying incidents that have happened in real life, then take a look at this channel, Phenomenon. They cover the most unusual stories around the world involving creepy rituals, true crime stories, bizarre occurrences, and even conspiracy theories. Subscribe to Phenomenon and watch spine-chilling content. The link is in the description below. Wake up, Charlie, wake up. My brother Noah constantly kept pushing me to get up. What is it? Let me sleep. It's Christmas. Wake up. I understood he was not going to let me sleep anymore. Reluctantly, I came out from the warm blanket and looked out the window. The world outside my window was covered with a crystal white snow. Christmas is indeed the time of joy. Noah stood beside me with a big smile. I smiled back and said, "Merry Christmas." He hugged me while giggling sweetly. We came downstairs and saw Mom decorating the Christmas tree. "You two up already? Merry Christmas, my babies." Noah started running around the house, and I asked Mom, "Will Dad join us today?" The light of joy in my mom's face wore off immediately. "I don't think that will be a good idea." "What happened last night, Mom?" "What do you mean, Charlie?" "I heard you and Dad fight last night." Mom hesitated for a while. I could see a cloud of pain turning her face pale. She said in a calm but hopeless voice, "You're a big boy now, Charlie. There's something I'd better tell you. Your dad and I will no longer be together. I'll let you know more once Nana comes." "Nana's coming here?" "Yes, she will come tonight, and tomorrow we will leave for Jacksonville to live with your uncle for a while." Amidst the joy of holidays, I realized my parents would get a divorce. Even though I could feel the tension, I couldn't grasp why they decided to split up. Being an 11-year-old, all I could think is that once you grow up, reality hits you hard. My mom requested me not to mention any of this to Noah. I wasn't going to anyway. Noah and I sat down for our breakfast. Mom made us chocolate pancakes. "Mom, what are we gonna do tonight?" Noah asked enthusiastically. "Well, you be playing with your brother while I go to the airport to get Nana, and then we will go for a trip." "And Dad?" Yeah, he will join later." "Yeah, this is gonna be the best Christmas ever." "Yes, sweetie." I was very much aware that Dad wouldn't be spending Christmas with us. He might be with his friends, preparing himself to get through this divorce. What made me angry was that he didn't even say goodbye to us or see us before leaving. Thinking all this and burning in my own rage, I spent the entire day killing people in video games. Noah was busy with Mom hanging Christmas balls on the tree. I felt both didn't care that Dad was not home on this special day with us for a moment. I finally decided to ignore all that and talk to my dad when I saw him. Around 6:30, my mom left for the airport to pick up Nana, and it was just my little brother in the house and me. It wasn't the first time we were home alone. We live in a close neighborhood, so it was safe. Noah came and started bugging me to play with him just when our doorbell rang. I went to the main door and looked through the eye hole. A man dressed as Santa was standing on the other side. His clothes were pretty dirty. and the long Santa beard had stains on it. Without opening the door, I asked, "What do you want?" "I'm Santa. I came here with gifts for you." "Dad, is that you?" "Ho, ho, 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 ho. Seems like you caught me, Charlie." Being excited and enthralled with joy, I opened the door and hugged him tightly. My dad hugged me back. I could hear Noah yelling, "Dad, Dad, you're home." "Where were you the entire day, Dad?" "I went to get some gifts for you guys." "What did you bring for me?" "It's a big surprise." My dad stepped in and took off his Santa hat. His hair was all messed up, and I could see a weird look in his eyes. What even shocked me more was his careless behavior towards a difficult situation. He fought with Mom, then didn't come home the entire day, but he behaved like everything was fine. He took out 2 gift boxes and handed them to Noah and me. Noah immediately rushed to his room to get the paper knife to open his present. Taking that window of opportunity, I asked Dad, "What happened to you and Mom?" "She said you won't be living with us from now." "What else did your mom say?" She said we would live with Uncle Jim for a while. Nana is coming here tonight. Mom went to the airport to pick her up." "Well, everything is going to be just fine. Don't worry. Dad is here, and he's going to solve the problem tonight." "So, you guys won't get a divorce?" "Of course not, Charlie. I love your mom, and I'll prove that tonight." Noah came running before I could talk about this more. "I got a toy gun. What did you get, Charlie?" "Not now, Noah." "But Dad, Mom said..." "Oh, Charlie, you worry so much. Let's forget about all this and enjoy our own until Mom comes back. Come on, who's up for a game of hide and seek, huh?" Me. My dad laughed, and Noah started to pull me to start this game of hide and seek. Even though I was baffled, I decided to put on a happy face and play a stupid game for the sake of my little brother's happiness. I was all ready to ask Mom and Dad what the hell was going on when she returned home. My dad faced the wall and started counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. But remember, you both can't hide in the same place. I hid in my closet, and Noah hid under his bed. I waited for Dad to find me soon, but 5 minutes went by, and I didn't hear him enter my room. I still waited, sitting inside the closet. 15 minutes went by, and he still didn't come looking for me. I couldn't sit back anymore, so I went out of the closet screaming, "Dad, are we still playing?" But I didn't get any reply. I expected to hear Noah yelling as I ruined the game, but he didn't make a sound either. I went to his room and looked under his bed. Noah was not there. Thinking he and Dad might be chilling in the living room, I walked past the corridor and stopped. My eyes went to the floor first. The entire wooden floor was smeared with fresh blood. Its solid metallic smell choked my voice, and I lifted my face. My dad was standing near the Christmas tree, humming a melody and decorating the Christmas tree. "Dad, what's..." "Oh, there you are. How does the tree look now, Charlie?" What I saw swept the ground beneath my feet. Severed body parts that once belonged to my little brother Noah hung like bells from our Christmas tree. My dad laughed and said, "Ha ha 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 ha. I told you Daddy would solve all the problems. What have you done?" "I solved the problem, Charlie. Look, Noah was the problem. He's not your little brother. He's not even my son. He's my brother's son, with whom your mom slept with in my absence. But don't worry, I still love her, and I forgave her." But we can't move on if the consequences of her mistakes keeps running around the house in front of my eyes. So Noah had to go. Now you, your mother and I, we all can live happily ever after. Merry Christmas. Have a holly jolly Christmas. It's the best time of the year. I don't know if there'll be snow, but have a cup of tea. Oh. On Christmas Eve in 1989, I was traveling through Mexico City in my boyfriend's car. He was driving and I was navigating. There were Christmas decorations up along the streets and most of the traffic was moving at a snail's pace, taking care not to hit the dense pockets of people walking up and down the street. We were in a hurry though, so my boyfriend turned off one of the main roads and we cut down a side street to avoid the congestion. We made a few more turns and suddenly stopped when we realized we didn't have a clue where we were. I opened the map while my boyfriend put the car in park and lit up a cigarette. I was tracing our route on the map to backtrack us when something struck our car hard on the front side right next to me. I caught a glimpse of a figure slam into our windshield and bounce forward off the car. I cried out in shock while my boyfriend stuffed his cigarette in the ashtray and stepped out of the car. This is where the experience became strange. I've never shared this before with anyone other than my closest friends and family who I trust. While my boyfriend was climbing out of the car, I saw the figure who struck us stand up awkwardly, holding his head and limp across the street. My boyfriend completely ignored him and bent down to look at the front of the car. I rolled down my window and called out, "Hey," to the man as he limped away. My boyfriend, thinking I was yelling at him, called back to me, "Don't get out." I called back, "What? Why?" And my boyfriend stood back up and I noticed blood on his pants from where he had knelt down. "He's dead," my boyfriend said, and he rubbed his face. "What? No, he's not, he's..." I turned and started to point in the direction the man had looked away in, but he was gone. I got out of the car and stood up. I saw enough to understand what my boyfriend meant. The man we had struck had flipped off the windshield and caught his head in a storm drain. His neck was very clearly broken and he was bleeding heavily from 2 different compound fractures in his legs where he had struck our car with his bike. The bike itself was lying on its side by my feet, the front wheel bent sideways and the back wheel still spinning. I was in shock and kept jerking my head back and forth down the street the man had looked down on and the figure at my feet. It didn't make sense. They were wearing the exact same clothes. "How many people did we hit?" I asked my boyfriend. He looked at me like I had hit my head. "Only one," he replied. Then he started waving his arms to flag down a police car. I sat down on the sidewalk and stared at the ground, feeling like I was going to be sick. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't seen a ghost because I had seen the shadow of the man cast on the stone wall behind him as he stood up and limped away. But there he was. The exact same man who had stood up right there on the ground in front of our car. The police blocked off the area, examined the bike and our cracked windshield and determined the guy had been speeding down the hill on his bike and struck us without applying the brakes. They asked me what I saw and the best that I could do was stammer that it happened so fast. I thought we had hit 2 people. We got a ride from a family member to my boyfriend's house, but I was still in such a state of shock that I couldn't even touch the dinner that had been prepared for us. People have since asked if the man who stood up was bloody or if I could see the whites of his eyes. Honestly, I don't recall seeing either. All I could say with certainty is that he stood up, held his right hand to his head and limped away. He didn't react to my boyfriend stepping out of the car. I don't know if I believe in ghosts or life after death, but if that's the case, this man was physically reacting to the impact that had killed him, seeming not to have noticed that he was dead. Occasionally I dream about that night and that impact, but in the dream I never see the man stand back up. I see a bright flash of lights and then nothing. No details of the man himself after the hit. I never even found out the man's name. It was the worst Christmas of my life. The best story my grandfather ever told me happened back when he was 18 years old on Christmas Eve in 1959. He was lying on his couch with a broken leg, which was perched on the arm of the couch, all wrapped up in a cast. He was listening to the radio and watching the snow fall outside as he used the poker to adjust the wood in the fire. It was about 8 p.m. and he was alone in the house. His family lived on a farm in the middle of nowhere in Kansas, and his father and brothers were across the property in the barn, roughly about a mile away. He doesn't recall where his mother was. He was reading something in the newspaper about President Eisenhower when there came a furious pounding at the door. An enraged voice screamed from the other side of the door that Owen, my great-grandfather, was going to die tonight. My grandfather didn't respond to this. Unable to move off the couch, he pulled the rug across the room until the shotgun, which had been leaning against the fireplace, was in reach, and he picked it up and cocked it, pointing it towards the front door. My grandfather says for the next 5 to 10 minutes, the man continued screaming, circling the house and pounding on windows, screaming for Owen to come out. He was clearly drunk and out of his mind and wasn't leaving the house until someone opened up. My grandfather winced as the man banged on the window right above the couch, but he still didn't move or acknowledge him. Finally, the man returned to the front door and pounded on it until he kicked it in. My grandfather said that he felt the blast of cold air and the stench of tobacco and whiskey as the man stomped through the dark hallway and walked right into the living room. He was a tall, lanky guy with brown teeth and an uneven gray beard, like he had only shaved part of his face. The guy's eyes were as big as hubcaps and he was barefoot, which was crazy as it was snowing outside. For about 10 seconds, the guy didn't even notice my grandfather, but was glancing around the room quickly, his eyes darting back and forth like a rat until his eyes fell upon the couch. He saw my grandfather, he saw the shotgun, and he froze like a deer in the headlights. My grandfather cocked the hammer back on one of the barrels. He had him dead to rights and the intruder knew it. My grandfather snapped, "Get the fuck out." The man took a step back, looking more enraged than afraid. "Where's Owen?" he hissed. "Get out," my grandfather yelled. The guy turned around, walked into the kitchen and dug through the pantry until he found a pint of whiskey. He even turned around and looked back into the living room just to make sure the shotgun was still up. He threw back the whiskey, dropped the bottle in the sink and walked out, calling back over his shoulder, "Tell Owen I said Merry Christmas." Once the guy was outside, my grandfather heard him knock over the pile of firewood by the steps. After another minute, he smelled smoke and realized the guy had set fire to the pile, likely intending to burn the house down. My grandfather hobbled over awkwardly, shotgun still up, barely able to hold it straight on his bad leg, and peered outside. The guy was gone, but there was so much snow around the fire and so much icy wind assaulting it that the fire was already nearly out. When Owen and the others got back and saw the charred marks on the front stairs, they asked what happened and my grandfather told them everything. Owen flew into a rage, took the shotgun and followed the guy's tracks out across the fields with a lantern. He didn't come back until Christmas morning when the family was all gathered in the kitchen for breakfast. Owen tossed the gun down and hissed that the fucking thing hadn't even been loaded. When my grandfather asked if he got him, Owen nodded and responded, "Oh yes," and that was it. He never got my great-grandfather Owen to report exactly what happened or even know how he knew the man. My grandfather said that he never saw the stranger ever again. I asked him if he thought Owen had killed him and he responded, "I'm almost positive that he did." When I asked, "But how did he do it with no ammo in the gun?" my grandfather looked back at me and said, "There's dozens of ways to kill a man with your hands." I live in the middle of butt-fuck nowhere. Seriously, it's a literal ghost town. Ghost towns are pretty common in Texas. They're towns that were once booming because of the oil in the area. But once that oil dries up, people have no reason to stay. So they move out. The buildings are left to rot. That's what my town is like. Empty and rotting. There's only a handful of bamboos left, including mine. My dad owns a roadside bar and grill. The customers are mostly truckers passing through, looking for a place to shower, eat, and take a nap before continuing on their way. But once a month, my dad hosts a biker night. Growing up, it was my favorite night of the month. All these scary-looking dudes riding up on their Harleys. They couldn't have been nicer. I learned a lot about friendship and honor from these guys. In December 2003, my dad hosted the monthly biker night with the theme Santa's Ride. The bikers, dressed in their own interpretation of Santa Claus, rode in with motorcycles adorned with twinkling lights and jingling bells. I was 6 at the time, and the little darling of the event. The bikers loved showering me with Christmas gifts. This one biker, who I called Uncle Teddy, the most massive Santa biker of them all, would present me with candy canes and Christmas-themed toys. To anyone else, he would have looked terrifying. He was easily 6'5", built like a house, and covered in tattoos. But I adored him. The biker Christmas party went on into the early hours of the morning, but only being 6 years old, I started to fall asleep around 9 p.m. As my eyes grew heavy and my dad set me up in a cozy corner of the restaurant with a big armchair and blankets, Uncle Teddy and my dad would take turns every 20 to 30 minutes or so to check on me. I was fast asleep, dreaming of Father Christmas and their reindeer, when I felt a hand on my shoulder. Slowly and sleepily, I woke up from my dream to see a man I'd never seen before. He wasn't dressed in biker gear, but he was wearing one of those bad Christmas sweaters, so I assumed he was one of the guests at the party. He smiled and told me his name was Sean. He explained that my dad had asked him to take me home. I was so tired I could barely stand, so Sean scooped me up in his arms. I remember telling him that I needed my presents, but he said that my dad would bring them home for me later. As we walked out of the back of the building, Sean told me stories of what I'd missed at the party. He knew my dad's name, Uncle Teddy, and the other people too. So I didn't think it was weird that I hadn't met him before. I just assumed he was a biker that I didn't meet. It wasn't until we got into his car that I started to feel weird. Why didn't Sean have a motorbike like everyone else? He opened the back door of the car and sat me down. You know how in senior citizen homes, they often have plastic-wrapped couches or chairs? That's what the back seat of his car was like, totally covered in plastic. When I think back now, I realize how easy it would be to clean a seat covered in plastic. No trace of anything left behind. Sean climbed into the front seat and turned on the radio. As he pulled out of the parking lot, I spotted Uncle Teddy and waved through the window. I'm thankful every day that he saw me. Just thinking of what could have happened to me had he not spotted me makes me sick to my stomach. Teddy wasted no time in taking action, realizing that this strange guy was trying to kidnap me. Teddy ran towards his bike, calling other bikers to join in. Sean's car turned onto the road, and we drove off into the night. I don't think Sean realized that we were being followed. There was no way he would have driven so slowly had he known. There was no way he would have pulled off into a dark lay-by. There was no way he would have climbed into the back seat with me, but he did. In the dead of night, this creep who kidnapped me tried to, well, I don't need to spell it out for you. You can use your imagination. Sean's body was heavy against mine, and just as I thought all hope was lost, I heard the sound of motorcycle engines. The lay-by lit up with headlamps. The car door was thrown open, and a hand pulled Sean out of the back of the car. I didn't see what happened next, but the sounds of boots and cracking ribs will stay with me forever. I rode back to the bar on the back of Teddy's Harley. When we arrived, my dad was crying, a sight I never want to see again. He hugged me so tightly, I thought he would never let me go. The police arrived soon after I got back. Statements were taken, but there was no search party or big manhunt for Sean. The police found him in a broken heap by his car in the lay-by. I asked my dad recently how Teddy didn't go to prison for assaulting my kidnapper. Turns out the policeman falsified the statements to say that I was the one who kicked and bought my attacker off me. There's no way a 6-year-old could have fought that hard, but no one questioned it. No one was going to send Teddy to prison for saving a little kid from a pedophile. Sean, which was a fake name, only served 2 years in prison for what he did. I never saw him again, but if I did, I'd be sure to call Teddy and his friends to finish what they started. My wife and I don't live together. She had become abusive over the last few months, mostly towards our daughter. Our daughter is almost 18 months old and is my whole world. I am unemployed at the moment, but my mother had been helping me out a lot. Today at around 4 p.m., I took my daughter to the store. I usually do this around the time she wakes up from her nap. My daughter is a very active child and can't seem to sit still for more than 10 minutes without getting cranky. I usually let her walk with me, holding her hand and patiently walking at her pace. I usually get just a juice for her, but had to get some extra groceries that I was short on: flour, sugar, and some noodles. I also remembered we were low on milk and grabbed a gallon on our way back. With all that I was carrying, I wasn't able to hold her hand. I made sure to walk behind her, but that only makes her walk slowly. As we made our way to the register, I was continuously urging her to keep walking, which she would do, but only for a second before her attention would be drawn to another rickety box with whatever was on sale, or she would see something colorful on a lower shelf. I was getting a bit frustrated, but I wasn't showing it in my voice. I kept urging her to keep walking, and she kept getting sidetracked. With everything I was carrying, I started to wish I had grabbed a basket. At the front, the customer service desk holds register 1, which was thankfully open. I want to take the time to mention that my daughter is very fond of saying hi and waving at everyone. I set everything up to get rung up, but the service attendant was busy with a return at the customer service area, so I had to wait. The entrance to the store is to my right. The only exit is behind the service desk, which leads into the small foyer before leading to the other doors. As people enter, they have to pass the customer service desk. I was being fatherly to my daughter, trying to entertain her with patty cake and the itsy bitsy spider, while we waited for the cashier to check us out. My daughter would frequently wave at people passing and say hi at her squeaky toddler voice. Some people would smile and wave back, while others would stop to adore her. At this point, I'm used to people doing that. It makes me happy knowing my daughter isn't a shy, cranky little asshole like some of the kids you see in the stores like this. The lady was ready to check us out, and I told my daughter to hold my hand since I wouldn't be looking her way. I had to pull my wallet out to retrieve my debit card to pay for the groceries and let her hand go for a moment. I kept looking her way to make sure she wasn't wandering off. The lady went to hand me my receipt when all of a sudden she yelled at someone behind me. "What are you doing with his daughter?" She bellowed as I turned to look at a man who had picked her up and started running towards the entrance doors. I was shocked. The doors didn't open since they were a one-way set of doors, and the cashier quickly picked up the phone yelling that she was calling the police. I was stunned to the point of immobilization, but quickly realized what was going on. I have a pocket knife that I usually carry on me so I can break the seal on my daughter's juice. I quickly ran after the man as someone started to make their way through the entrance doors. He didn't get a chance to run through before I slammed my fist across his temple. I decided not to use the knife in case I might get in trouble. The man stumbled and I grabbed my daughter from his arms. He then proceeded to run out the door, empty-handed. The police arrived about 5 minutes later and asked me what I had seen. I explained that I hadn't seen the man's face, since he had shaggy long hair and a beard. He was also wearing a hoodie, which wasn't that much of a surprise. They took the statement of several witnesses, including the cashiers, and had already had their other officers searching the area. Someone had said the guy had ran behind the building but the officers didn't find anyone. The police took us home and then asked more questions like, have you seen him before? Do you know anyone who looks like this man? And then proceeded to ask about the home life. The CPS had been over earlier in the day to discuss my wife's mental health issues, and the police had been here earlier as well. The officer asked if we needed any groceries or anything else, and I told them no. The officers left, leaving me their cards in case I saw the guy around the area. About 20 minutes later, I got a knock at the door. To my surprise, the officers had returned with the largest box of Pamper diapers I had ever seen, a large box of wipes, about 6 large Winco bags of groceries, and a couple of bags of toys. I fell to my knees and cried after they left us. I had spent almost 5 minutes choking back tears as I thanked them. They had left us with a Christmas card saying I was a strong father to have had so much go on recently, and that my daughter was lucky to have such a great father. There was $100 in the card too, wrapped in a note that said to get a drink or two if I needed it. I don't drink, so I will probably get some extra Christmas presents for my mom and daughter. So, to the fucker that tried to kidnap my daughter, I hope the police find you. And I hope we never meet again. Around a year ago, my husband and I finally managed to pull together enough savings to buy a new car. The 8-year-old Volkswagen we had been driving was bound to be neglected with the arrival of the new wheels. So I decided to sell it before it gathered dust. Christmas was also coming up and my finances were completely drained. It seemed like the logical thing to do. After posting it on a couple of advertisement websites and Facebook Marketplace, I quickly attracted 2 interested buyers. I arranged to meet the first one at a nearby park. It was an elderly gentleman urgently looking to buy a car for his teenage daughter. But he was only able to make me an offer far below what I was initially hoping for. Still, I felt bad for the guy, seeing as he wanted a gift for his kid. So I promised to let him have it should my second viewing fall through. He left in low spirits while I messaged the other potential buyer on Facebook Marketplace and scheduled the viewing. I was out alone that day, and while I'm fully aware of how dangerous it can be to meet up with strangers from the internet, I assumed it would be alright because it was broad daylight. Admittedly, I should have anticipated something shady. The second interested buyer instantly agreed to meet me at the same park within a few minutes. So I waited around until a Range Rover with blacked out windows pulled up. A tall guy exited the vehicle in a brash manner and told me that he was the one I'd been talking to on the marketplace, even though I had communicated with the female profile through Messenger. For some reason, I decided to ignore this immediate red flag and carried on showing him the car. The encounter felt a bit off, and the pit in my stomach only grew when I noticed more people following the guy out of the vehicle. There was no reason for 3 other men to accompany their friend viewing an old second-hand car. Yet I played it off and proceeded to list the Volkswagen's history and faults. Before long, the 4 of them began circling my car, with the first guy beginning to insist on a test drive. Perhaps I had been stupidly dismissive to that moment, but this made it clear enough that there were hidden motives to this viewing, and I wasn't about to enter the car with a brazen stranger. He persisted relentlessly, making me feel increasingly uncomfortable, to the point I just told him to have a spin around the block, and the rest of us waited. He found my suggestion amusing and blatantly taunted me by asking what I would do if he just didn't return the car, to which I simply responded that the insurance would probably cover it. In truth, I don't know what I was thinking. I didn't consider that it put me at great risk having him leave the car while I was stranded with his friends. Nonetheless, he climbed into the driver's seat and sped off to test it, while the shady trio just hovered near me, and spoke among themselves. I couldn't understand what they were saying, and I was starting to feel very uneasy. The worst scenarios played out in my mind. I was questioning whether the car was worth arguing over, or even losing my life for. Either way, I was on the verge of tears or a full-blown panic attack. By the time the guy returned, I was clutching my phone to my chest with my husband's number ready to be dialed. He arrogantly got out, slammed the car door shut, and offered me the same amount that the previous buyer had proposed. Trying to make his deal sound enticing, he encouraged me to get in the car with him so we could go collect the payment in cash. When he sensed my hesitance, he applied pressure by offering me way more than the actual value of the Volkswagen if I went with him immediately. Luckily, my husband called me that very second, and with attention briefly diverted, I quickly told them that I had a better offer, picked up the call, and jumped behind the wheel. I didn't delay in locking the doors and driving off, leaving them only with a quick wave. Once I got home, I texted the first buyer, and he was very excited to come over and close the deal. My husband arrived with him, and they promptly sorted out the paperwork. Soon the car was sold, the change of ownership was made, and we had accumulated some money to celebrate Christmas with. Everything seemed fine, until I spotted the same Range Rover later that night. The vehicle was parked right across the street from our house, and I instantly informed my husband about its unnerving appearance. We live at the end of a cul-de-sac, meaning there was a dead end and no explanation for that car to be there. As we peeked through the window, my phone began going off. The strange man was calling me and asking if I had reconsidered his offer, but I remained calm and politely told him that the car was already sold. He hung up with no protest, and 30 minutes later, the Range Rover drove off. A little paranoid, I considered calling the police, but my husband assured me that I was overreacting. Instead, I just kept an eye on the street for the rest of the night. The same car returned 3 times, coming to a standstill in front of our house before slowly driving off again. It was creepy as hell, yet it only happened that one night, and eventually all the plans we were busy with for the holidays distracted me from the matter. 4 days later, on a Friday night, I went out to get a few last-minute things for Christmas Eve from the convenience store. My husband was working late and it was after dark, but my neighborhood had always been very safe, and I felt more comfortable walking alone. It was a peaceful stroll until I reached the end of the cul-de-sac, and I noticed the low groan of a car engine drawing near. My body immediately went rigid when I realized that the Range Rover was coming down the street with its headlights turned off. By instinct, I ducked down into some nearby bushes and the car passed me. I was wearing full black that night, and I think that might have helped me camouflage me in the shadows. I watched them proceed to pull up to my house, and all 4 men jumped out. One of them was dressed as Santa Claus, and the others had elf costumes on. The festive outfits were obviously to conceal their identities, but I think I also made them fit right in with the outdoor decorations, and nobody in the neighborhood probably batted an eye to the scene. They boldly walked up to the front door and knocked. The sound reverberated to my ears, even from a distance. When no answer came, they resorted to kicking in my door and breaking an entry. My hands were shaking so bad that I had trouble unlocking my phone. Once I finally managed to reach the cops on the line, I begged them to come quick while I helplessly watched the men exit my home with heavy duffel bags. After the police arrived, they escorted me back, and we found the house completely ransacked. Most of my valuables were either stolen or destroyed. It was the worst Christmas I'd ever had, and I'm still shaken up by the thought of what could have happened had I been home. That was the last time I'll sell anything online again. One year shortly before Christmas, prior to the amazing development of online shopping, I unfortunately had to brave the busy stores with my husband and 2 kids. I absolutely did not want to go out, seeing as we had recently moved into a new apartment, and there was a lot of unpacking to do before we could even call it home and properly celebrate Christmas. Not only that, but I always hated going in any store during the rush of a festive season. However, at that point, we were eating bland ketchup sandwiches, and I couldn't put off getting groceries. When we arrived at the local shopping center, it was just as crowded as I dreaded it would be. So we decided to get all that we needed for at least the next 2 weeks to avoid the influx of last-minute shoppers. What was meant to be a speedy supply run quickly turned into an unsettling encounter that I won't soon forget. I was in the pharmacy aisle looking at hair dyes with my 2 young kids in the push basket when my husband rushed off to find a quiet spot to take an important business call. The kids were fussing as usual, though I had gotten so used to ignoring their antics that it only drew my attention after they abruptly stopped and sat silently. My son was 5 at the time and smiling in amusement at something behind me, while my daughter, of just over a year, blabbered in fragments. When she muttered the word creepy, it immediately alerted me, and I turned around to face a middle-aged man about 20 feet from us, blankly staring at my daughter. She was a blue-eyed, dimple-cheeked toddler with pale blonde curls back then, and her appearance always prompted compliments. It wasn't uncommon for people to gush over how cute she was and comment on her features, but this instance fell off straight away. Feeling extremely uneasy, I rushed out of the aisle to continue my shopping in another department. I texted my husband telling him what I find, and he arrived in no time, sensing that something wasn't right because I never bothered him during work calls. Not wanting to make a big deal of what happened, I casually mentioned to my husband that a weird guy was looking at us in a strange way. He asked me what the man looked like, but I had been caught off guard and didn't even get a good look at him in my attempt to dash away. The only description I could give was that he was short, chubby. My husband refused to leave my side after that, and we proceeded to the refrigerated section of the store. This was the most crowded area, and people were shoving us from every direction. I was finding my way to some frozen turkeys when my toddler piped up and exclaimed, "Santa!" As my gaze followed the direction which she pointed, I spotted the same guy at the end of the aisle, wearing the head of a Santa Claus costume. He was directly facing us and slowly waving. The whole situation was already very disturbing, but what added to it was the style of his Santa head. It was the silicone vintage mask with a braided beard made of faded brown string, and the eyes of the costume were hollowed out and just appeared as 2 dark black eyes. Without thinking, I began speed walking, leaving my husband behind and practically running to the storefront. Looking back on it now, I think my protective mama bear instincts kicked in, and I just wanted to get my kids out of that creep's line of sight. I found an empty lane and started shoving all the groceries onto the checkout line. The clerk even noticed my hysteria and questioned me about it. While I explained the situation to her, my husband came to my side and asked me where the guy was. I could tell he was getting pissed off and about to create a massive scene, which only made me want to leave the store more desperately. We managed to get our things checked out relatively fast, and my nerves were easing up as we made our way to the exit. That was until we saw the same man once again, this time standing near the entrance as though he was waiting for something. I stopped and informed my husband, who then approached a manager with the issue. A different cashier directed us to another exit, as the manager intended to confront the creepy stranger. Once outside, we loaded the car with groceries in no time, and I bunkled in my kids with trembling hands, all while the man stood in the doorway of the store, having an intimidating stare down with my husband from across the parking lot. We hightailed it out of there and headed straight home. I thought that was the end of that, a mere chance encounter with an unstable individual. Yet, things took a sinister turn about a week later. As I unpacked the last of our things, I opened one box in particular and found something that pushed my heart to my throat. It was the very same vintage Santa Claus mask that the guy in the store wore, tucked away in a box full of kitchen utensils. The hollowed-out eyes looked back at me, and all I could wonder was how many of these identical masks could possibly exist. Nothing felt the same after that discovery, even though I could never solve how the costume head ended up in a box that I packed. Later, I learned that a hospital nearby also had an outpatient facility that housed the mentally ill, recovering addicts, and all variety of people trying to reintegrate into society. Needless to say, we didn't live in that apartment for much longer past Christmas, and we made sure to do extensive research on the new area we moved to. My next-door neighbor is the Grinch. Yes, I'm sure of it now. He looks exactly like the Grinch. The only difference is he wears human skin. Since he moved here, weird things have started happening in our town. He says his name is Alfred, but I know he's lying. Alfred barely talks to anyone. He never comes out of the house. Everyone in town avoids him like he doesn't exist, but I know he's up to something these days. I tried telling my parents that he was the Grinch, but they said that it was my hyperactive imagination. Last night, I was sleeping in my room when I heard a stray cat meowing loudly. I looked out the window and saw Alfred sitting on his porch like a four-legged animal and hissing at the cat. I speak your language too. He then moved his long arms with sharp nails drastically in the air, and the cat ran away in fear. I was stunned to see this abnormal behavior. Alfred went inside his house and then came out with a garbage bag. I kept on watching him. A weird liquid was dripping from his bag. He went to the backyard of his house. I ran upstairs to the bathroom as the window had a perfect view of Alfred's backyard. I wanted to find out what he was up to. As I peeked from the bathroom window, I saw him again. There was a big hole already dug in his backyard. He suspiciously looked around and then buried the garbage bag in it. I was watching him silently, and he was inches away from covering the hole when suddenly a hand popped out of the garbage bag. My heart stopped. I couldn't believe my eyes. Alfred was burying a dead body in his backyard. Suddenly, he looked around and sniffed the air like a hungry tiger and looked directly at the bathroom window. I quickly crouched down. Drops of sweat appeared on my forehead. Did he see me? What if he realized I was watching him get rid of his victim? I went back to my room and stayed wide awake for almost the entire night. When I woke up, I decided to head downstairs to tell my parents what I saw last night. On my way, I overheard them talking to someone. Yes, the cops are looking for him. He went to the pub last night, but no one saw him after that. What about his daughter? Her grandmother took over. Poor kid lost her mom, and now her dad went missing. Mom, what's going on? Oh, honey, it's Patricia. Her dad went missing last night. What? I've seen Patricia's dad. A flashback came back to my mind. The disappearance of Patricia's dad triggered my mind. So maybe the body Alfred buried. Kevin? Yeah, Mom. Aunt Sally made cookies for you. Take some for Patricia. poor girl must be heartbroken before Christmas. Yeah, Mom. My mom packed a box of cookies, and I got on my bike to drop it off at Patricia's. Just when I set out on the sidewalk, Alfred blocked my way. He had bloodshot eyes and a scary grin on his face. My, look who's finally out of the house. I thought it would be best not to reply and just ignore him. So I moved my bike to drive past him, and he blocked my way again. Come on, we are neighbors. Don't you think it's a little rude not to talk to your neighbor? I only talk to humans. Move out of my way. What makes you think I'm not human? You could fool everyone, Alfred, but not me. Alfred suddenly snatched my hand, grasping it real tight, and spoke in a groggy, spine-chilling voice. Listen, kiddo, you think you know it all, but you don't. He then pushed my bike, which made me tumble, but I managed not to fall. I saw him walk away in the opposite direction. I could feel my heart racing. I'm certain now that the body Alfred buried in his backyard was Patricia's dad. I rode my bike to my destination. Patricia's house was decorated with Christmas lights and colorful chains. Her grandmother took me to the living room. She went to call Patricia as I eagerly watched the Christmas tree. It was decorated with so many things. And on top of that, the Christmas tree hung a Grinch face. Do you like my tree? I looked behind to see Patricia standing with a mysterious smile. She wore a beautiful red dress. There was no sadness or worry on her face. I felt a little weird seeing her so calm like that. Yeah, it's beautiful. My mom sent these cookies for you. Oh, thank you. I love cookies. Any news about your dad? Don't know. I don't even care if he ever comes back. You don't care? Patricia, I think Alfred did something to your dad. I swear I saw him last night. You should go home. It'll start snowing soon. Merry Christmas, Kevin. After saying that, she walked upstairs, and I stood there in shock. I never expected Patricia to react that way. My God, what if Alfred hypnotized her? Doesn't the Grinch possess superpowers or... I don't know, but someone needs to stop that evil man. On my way home, I couldn't help but think about the entire situation. Should I call the cops? Should I tell my dad about the dead body? They might not believe me. What if I made a secret call and informed the police? Yes, I could do that. They'll put the Grinch behind bars. On my way home, I used my phone to make an anonymous 911 call to inform them to check Alfred's backyard. I told them that there was a human body there. I went home and waited for the cops to arrive. My dad was decorating the Christmas tree, and my mom was making a special dinner when the loud cop sirens resonated around the neighborhood. They rushed to the door, opened it to see what was happening outside. I came out with a smile on my face. I was so happy to know that the Grinch would finally be taken away. He'll get the appropriate punishment for ruining Patricia's Christmas. Open the door and step out of the house, Alfred. The cops knocked on his door. Everyone in the neighborhood watched them in a tense silence. After a few seconds, the door creaked open, and Alfred came out. I couldn't believe my eyes at the way he was dressed. He was wearing a Santa Claus jacket and hat set, green nylon leggings, and a pair of red elf shoes. He was the Grinch. The Alfred made it look so natural. Sir, we had a call and we need to search your backyard immediately. Alfred quickly shifted his creepy gaze at me. His eyes were glowing. He licked his lips and smiled ear to ear. Sure, go ahead. I'm all toasty inside. Within the next few minutes, the cops found Patricia's father, Ralph Simon's dismembered dead body, buried inside Alfred's backyard. More cops were called, and handcuffs were put on Alfred's creepy hands. Everyone stared in shock. People couldn't believe that he managed to kill that man and bring his body to his house without being seen by anyone. My chest doubled in pride. I helped catch a killer, I set the town Grinch-free on Christmas. There might have been no family Christmas dinner where their central topic wasn't about the shocking turn of events. I slept peacefully that night, but my peace didn't last long. The next morning I woke up. I heard my mom calling my name. Kevin? Kevin? Patricia's here to see you. I got up and ran downstairs, thinking that she came to thank me. I thought she guessed I was the anonymous caller. Patricia, I know Alfred put you under a spell. That day, I was trying to tell you everything, but you... Shut up, Kevin. You should be ashamed of yourself. What? What are you saying? I helped the cops catch your father's killer. You know nothing, Kevin. He was never the monster. It was my father who was the real monster. He came home drunk every night and beat. I was crying on the porch that night before Christmas when Alfred saw me. He asked me what I wanted for Christmas, and I said I wanted freedom. He saved me from my abusive dad. He gave that man exactly what he deserved, and you sent him to jail. I hate you, Kevin. You should have known better. Enjoy your Christmas. Patricia slammed the door and left. I stood frozen. I didn't know how to feel. Regardless of the terrible things someone had done, does it justify killing them? Despite the messed up nature of the story, I couldn't help feel that it was me who stole Christmas, rather than the Grinch. I was sleeping in my room, dreaming of Santa Claus. He was riding his sleigh pulled by reindeer, hovering amidst the clouds and then over the moon. The sky was filled with stars, and the night of Christmas was all set to shower joy over the children. It was one of the most beautiful dreams I ever had. When suddenly, my room door creaked open, and the annoying, reverting cry of the door woke me up. Rubbing my sleepy eyes, I saw a tall, fat man standing in my room. I could barely see his face, but I did notice his eyes. His glowing yellow eyes were staring at me. He was dressed as Santa Claus, but his arrival didn't give me any joy. I was scared instead. Who are you? You know who I am. I'm the Santa. You're Santa. Where's your bag full of gifts? Downstairs. Want to come check them out? His glowing eyes had a hypnotic invite to them that I just couldn't ignore. I got down from the bed and slowly started to follow him down the stairs. The entire house was in darkness, but the living room downstairs had a little bit of light coming from the fireplace. Probably my drunk dad forgot to put it out before going to bed. He stopped near the fireplace, facing his back at me, staring at the cookies and milk I left for him on the table. Are those for me? Yes. Mom said to leave them for you. How sad. Why? You don't like it? Exactly. That's why I'm sad. I like it so much. His wide fingers with bumpy knuckles stretched out to the plate of cookies, grabbed it in one swift motion, and started jamming his mouth with the cookies. The more he ate, the more his mouth went bigger. His white beard fell off from his cheekbone because of his vigorous eating style. Once his mouth was heavily filled with cookies, he went for the glass of milk. Like a deranged, hungry man, he chugged the entire glass, spilling milk all over his red coat. For the first time, I noticed his pocket on the red coat. A huge, sharp knife was lurking in it. The steel of the knife had blood on it. Finishing his meal, he let out a burp. Oh, that was a good eat. Especially after the heavy work. What kind of work? Oh, Santa's job is tough, kid. So, what's your name? Kyle? So, Kyle, How old are you? 8. We walked to the decorated Christmas tree standing in the corner. I noticed a large yellow gift box with a red ribbon lying under it. It was so big that I thought it must have been a robot car, or at least like a big toy. I brought a gift for you. I kept staring at the box with surprised eyes. He let out a huge grin and said, "Go, open it. Take a look." I reached for the box, opening the lid slowly. And as I did, my heart began to race. Suddenly, I started to think that something bad must be inside of it. Then, I opened the box. A pair of hands were resting inside the box. There was no blood on them, just pale, cold hands severed from the wrists, cut clean. The hands belonged to 2 different people. Both of the hands had my parents' wedding rings. What is that? People who didn't pay their debts, Kyle. I started screaming and ran in the direction of my room, but grabbed my shirt and pushed me to the other side. I fell onto the wooden floor, yet still managed to stand up and run inside the closest room. After getting inside, I locked the door, hearing his chasing feet stopping right outside. He probably ran after me, but I got in here first, fortunately. "Open the door. I'm not gonna hurt you. You're no good to me dead." "Mom? Dad? Oh, they're right behind you." I turned around, and to my horror, my parents were dead, lying on the floor. Their mouths were open, their eyes were wide. Not a single drop of blood on them or anywhere in the room. I stood up, crying. I was only 8 years old, but my mom, luckily, taught me how to call 911. I sat down and started sobbing on the floor. I was a kid stuck in a room with my parents' dead bodies and the murderer outside my door. I started searching the room for a phone. I couldn't find any. The fake Santa kept knocking on the door, screaming, "Don't force me to take down this door. Come out, and I swear I'll spare your life." That's when I noticed the half-open window on the opposite side. It was a ground floor window. I could escape to my neighbor's house for help. I had just come up with the idea when the door slung open. Breaking the locks and the lights turned on. I saw the man entering my room. He was grinding his teeth in anger. For the first time I saw his face. I will never forget the cruelty on it. "Now what? Where are you going to hide now?" I looked at the window and then at him. It was still possible. I ran for my life. "Hey, where do you think you're going?" His big hands tried to grope at me, but I got saved by inches this time. I jumped out of the window and fell onto the grass, luckily without injury. I got up and started running again. I crossed the fence without any trouble, and as I looked back to the window one last time, I saw the man staring at me. He had a dead, emotionless face. Then, he yelled, "Ho, ho, ho, Merry Christmas." I started crying, but I didn't stop. I jumped onto the porch of my neighbor and started buzzing their doorbell like crazy. Everyone woke up, and a woman opened the door. Luckily, I knew her. She was friends with my mother. She took me in and asked me all these questions. I can only say one sentence. Santa killed my mom and dad. Then I fainted into her arms. To date, the murder of my parents that I witnessed in my childhood remains a mystery. My dad's lawyer told my aunt, whom I understood after growing up, that my parents loaned money from some mafia gang and got in trouble with them. I will never forget the man in my house who came dressed as Santa Claus on Christmas night. The sight of that yellow box with red ribbon still traumatizes me to this day. I can't tolerate the color of yellow or red. It's like a trigger to me. I don't know if the cops will ever be able to catch the guy, but one thing that still reeks in my mind is how the hell there was no blood. As if my parents' veins were sucked dry by some creature. I have so many questions and zero answers. The traumatizing events of this story happened to me several years ago. This is the first time I'm sharing my story publicly in hopes it may help others who read it. At the time, I was a mother of a 4-year-old daughter. Her name is Juniper, and she is my entire life. The day of these events, my husband was at work, so I decided to do some Christmas shopping at the mall. On the way in, Juniper saw Santa sitting in the middle of the atrium and began jumping because I assumed she associated Santa with presents. We decided to get into line, even though it was long. We could get a picture and she could tell Santa what she wanted for Christmas. When it was finally Juniper's chance to sit on his lap, I immediately felt uncomfortable. I didn't like the way he was staring at her. His eyes were big and looked as if though he had been on something. She sat there for a moment and told the man what she wanted as I watched, filled with anxiety. After about 2 minutes, he got her off his lap and winked goodbye to her and said Merry Christmas. Happy this ordeal was over, we did the little bit of shopping we had to do and pressed on through the day. While I was browsing around one of the clothing stores, I looked up and thought I noticed the mall Santa sitting outside of the store we were in. Not taking any chances, I grabbed Juniper and walked out of the other entrance of the store. After a little while longer of shopping, we decided to get some lunch in the food court at the mall. I kept my eyes peeled because I just had mother's intuition that something wasn't right. We were finishing our food and literally as we were about to get up, the mall Santa came over to our table. He walked right up to Juniper and said in a jolly Santa-like voice, "Hey there, Juniper. Remember to be good so Santa can come and bring you lots of presents." She was so excited, and so were all the people around me. It's easy to say what you would do in that situation, but I just stood still. I thought freaking out my daughter and rushing her away from Santa would be a traumatizing event, so I grabbed her hand and told her it was time to go. She said goodbye to Santa and we left. That night at home, I told my husband about the entire story. He was angry but agreed with my course of action. The next day, I woke up at about 8 a.m. My husband was already gone for work for the day. I happened to look outside and saw a strange blue car that I had never noticed parked outside my house. This didn't really bother me considering it could have been anyone, but it was just peculiar. At about 11 a.m., I looked out the window again and noticed the car was still in the exact same spot. I made the choice to go out to my mailbox in front of my home and investigate the car. The car was empty, except for the passenger seat. There was a Santa hat on the seat. I tried not to jump to any conclusions, but it was just starting to make too much sense in my head. I ran inside and called my husband. He said I was grasping at straws, but decided to come home anyway to make sure I was okay. A couple of minutes later, my worst fear was realized. I looked out the window and saw the man in his car. It was the mall Santa, and he was taking a picture of my house with his cell phone. Once he saw me, he drove away, and he drove away so fast I couldn't get the license plate number. Minutes later, my husband came home and I explained what I saw. We called the authorities, but there really wasn't anything that could be done. I felt angry with myself that I'd looked at the car all morning and couldn't get a license plate number. My husband stayed home from work the next day just in case. At about noon, we walked around the house and noticed footprints outside of Juniper's window. Footprints in the snow that neither of us left. That night, I couldn't sleep. I felt like I was just waiting for something horrible to happen. My husband, Juniper, and I all decided to have a camp out in the living room so she could be with us all night. Shortly after midnight, my husband and I were alerted to the sound of a car pulling up. It was the mall Santa car from the day before, and he was approaching the house with a giant bag in his hand. I called the police as my husband stalked him through the windows. The lights were off, so the mall Santa couldn't see us through the windows. He made his way all the way to Juniper's window. He started to tap on the windows, almost as if though he was trying to wake her up. My husband stood on the other side of the window, trying not to scare him away until the cops came. That's when we heard it. "Hey Juniper, it's Santa. Come take a ride in my sleigh and I'll show you the reindeer." Praying that the cops would show up any minute, I sat in the fetal position not knowing if this lunatic had a gun or any other weapon. He kept tapping and whispering, "It's me, Santa." Finally the cops showed up, and when we heard the sirens out front, my husband jumped out the window and tackled the mall Santa. My husband yelled for the cops, and the cops detained the man. He didn't have any weapons on him, but his car did have duct tape and rope. It gives me nightmares to this day, thinking of that horrible situation and what could have happened. One Christmas miracle is that my family is safe, and my daughter didn't have to really experience any of the intense feelings my husband and I did over those couple of days. If you as a parent have instincts about the safety of your child, please follow them. If I would have just left the mall when I felt uneasy, I could have possibly avoided this entire series of events. On Christmas Day 2018, my girlfriend and I took a trip to her parents' house. This was my first time meeting her family, and I was excited to meet them. Christmas is by far my favorite holiday, and I love the Christmas spirit. After spending 3 or 4 hours there, though, I was definitely getting anxious to leave. My social battery had been about completely drained. Sometimes it takes a lot out of me being around new people, especially if it's for a long period of time. I don't know why I'm like that, but I've been this way ever since I was just a small child. It's not that I don't like people or enjoy their company, I'm just a person that likes to keep to themselves. Or maybe I should say I have a very select few amount of people that I love and interact with daily. I just wasn't used to being around so many new people and getting all this attention. Right before we were about to leave, we quickly realized that over the 4 or 5 hours we spent there, we got lots of snow. I knew it was snowing, but I didn't think we were going to be hit with as much snow as we got hit with. There is easily an additional 3 to 5 inches of snow that was piled on top of the roads that were already in bad enough condition beforehand. My girlfriend and I lived just over an hour away from her parents' house, so with the roads being as dangerous as they were, we got settled in, and we pretty much had no other choice than to crash there for the night. The snow had no plans on slowing down anytime soon, and there was no way we were going to drive under those horrible conditions. My girlfriend seemed quite happy about staying the night, but me, on the other hand, I wasn't so psyched about it. I wasn't going to complain though. I was just happy I was under a safe and warm roof with my girlfriend. Plus I got to spend some more time with her family, and I really got to know her dad some more. We bonded over similar interests that we both had, like hunting and basketball, which I thought was pretty cool. Her parents were very nice and welcoming to me, and they prepared a great meal for myself and everyone else, which I was thankful for. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad after all. I couldn't have been more wrong to think that, though. It was getting late and everybody was venturing off to bed. My girlfriend Grace got us some blankets, and we went to the spare bedroom that we were staying in for the night. We turned on a random horror movie, and she fell asleep less than halfway through the movie. I, on the other hand, wasn't tired at all. All of a sudden, I heard this weird noise that sounded like it came from outside. It almost sounded like smaller-sized tree branches were dragging across the bedroom window. I really didn't think a whole lot about it at first, but it definitely caught me off guard and raised my suspicion. I almost got up out of bed to try and take a look outside, but Grace was lying in my arms and I didn't want to wake her up for nothing. I think I just assumed that I was overthinking. A bit of time passed by and I was finally getting sleepy, but I really had to use the bathroom. I got up out of bed slowly and quietly as possible to ensure I didn't wake Grace up, and I did my business in the bathroom, and I lied back down in bed after. As I was drifting asleep, I heard this disturbing scream come from outside. It was loud enough to wake me up and startle me, but not enough to wake Grace up. I got up and I looked out the window, and I kid you not, I could see a person that was standing in the middle of the backyard looking at me. I wasn't so sure they could see me, but I didn't weigh it out as an option. I didn't really care anyways if they could see me or not, to tell the truth. My gut told me something was terribly wrong, though. You know when you get that gut feeling of dread? It's an unexplainable feeling, but that's how I felt. I tried to wake my girlfriend up, but she's a heavy sleeper, so after a few attempts, I gave up. Stupidly enough, I ran outside by myself to go and see what the hell was happening. And the person I saw only a few minutes ago was gone. They were completely out of sight. I then spotted the footsteps in the snow that looked like they led all the way to the shed in the backyard. I followed them cautiously, but quickly at the same time. Then I heard the scratching sound as I was approaching the shed. It almost sounded like the way a knife sounds when scraped against metal. Well, even so, I continued moving forward. As I got up closer to the front door of the shed, I noticed that it was cracked open. I opened it some more and peeked my head through ever so slowly, with my heart practically beating out of my chest now. And that's when I saw the most disturbing thing I will ever see in my entire life. That same man from earlier was standing right there, no more than 10 feet away from me. He had a sledgehammer in his hand and was approaching me now. I stood there in shock for probably a few seconds, but I screamed for help as loud as I could immediately. I started to run back to the house, and he began chasing me. When I turned around, though, right before I got to the front door, he was out of sight. Almost like he vanished out of thin air. I didn't question it much. I was just ready to get the hell inside to safety. I ran upstairs in a panic to Grace, and I told her what happened. She started freaking out when I told her, even more than I was, and we woke her family up and told them as well about what happened. Thankfully, they have cameras up surrounding the perimeter of the house, so Grace's dad played back the footage so they could see what we were talking about. Unfortunately, it didn't pick up the man's facial features at all, and it wasn't any help in identifying the man. I barely got a good look at him either. All I can really say is that he was average height, that he had medium-length black curly hair, and was creepy as fuck. For some reason, her parents didn't want me to call the police though, and I think they tried to convince me that it was some sort of prank and that we shouldn't be worried about it. I don't know how the hell they could believe that, but I thought that was pretty weird. Something about that didn't seem right to me. You would think that if someone was on your property with a weapon and they chased your daughter's boyfriend in the middle of the night, that something would probably kick in inside of you. That was definitely way more than just a silly prank. The guy was going to fucking kill me, for Christ's sakes. I skipped out on going to Grace's parents' house every Christmas since. And I've been running out of excuses, but I really don't care to go back. Last year on Christmas Eve, I was sitting in my living room on the couch, enjoying my free time alone. My two boys, who were only 5 and 8 years old at the time, were already in bed, and my wife was already sleeping peacefully as well. I had a couple hours to myself to do whatever I wanted. So I turned a random Christmas movie on that I found on TV, and I let it play in the background. I turned our Christmas tree lights on, and I made myself some hot chocolate to really help set the atmosphere of a cozy Christmas Eve night. I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention to the movie. I was mostly just playing games on my phone and scrolling through Facebook. I just remember feeling very content and relaxed. It was the perfect night. I had the fireplace going, and I had leftovers from last night's dinner, and the next day was Christmas. I didn't think that life could get any better than that. Unexpectedly and completely out of nowhere, I heard a thud sound that came from the other side of the house. It scared me at first, but I figured it was nothing. But then I heard it again. I then looked outside through the front living room window and the kitchen window that was above the sink and all around the house. I peeked my head through my kids' bedroom. They share a room, might I add, just to see if anything was going on that I should know about. They were both sound asleep. I checked my wife and I's room as well, but she also seemed to be sleeping. What the hell was that noise? I heard the noise like 3 or 4 separate times, and each time it sounded like someone was pounding on something with their fist. I took a step outside in my slippers to have a look around the house, but there was nobody. Maybe my mind was just playing tricks on me, I thought. I decided to let it go and head back inside. I was now walking back to our patio, and just as I made it inside and was about to lock the sliding glass door, I heard a scream. It sounded like a kid. Right away, I knew it was Luke, who was my youngest boy. I wasn't sure where the screaming was coming from, but I ran to the boys' room and explored through the door and turned the light on. Logan, who was my other son, woke up in a panic and Luke was missing. The bedroom window was wide open. I asked Logan where he was, and he said he had no idea. I told Logan to run to Mom in our room until I heard know that Luke was missing and to call the police. I grabbed my 9mm handgun and I rushed outside and ran to my backyard, calling out for Luke's name. And thankfully, he was able to let out a scream. We live out in the country, and we have a huge yard that sits on about 15 acres of mostly dense woods and trails. I followed the sound of his scream and it led me to the woods. I found myself chasing after him, just trying my absolute best to find him. I screamed and screamed for him, but eventually he stopped screaming back. That's when my panic really set in, and I swear to you, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I kept searching for him, and after a few minutes, I heard something that sounded like a person stepping through sticks and leaves. Then I heard a sound of what sounded like someone taking a big gasp and trying to hold their breath. I looked all around me and I turned the flashlight on. I didn't have it on up until this point because I didn't want to give off my position. I knew my son was out there with someone who was trying to kidnap him. And I knew that I knew my woods better than anybody, and I knew he was still out there and that they were called spy. I must have did a 360 4 or 5 different times looking all around, until I finally spotted what looked like to be someone laying on the ground. All I could see was a shadow. Almost as soon as I pointed the flashlight at it and took a few steps closer, I then saw in fact that it was a man. He was lying on top of my son and he was suffocating him. The man ran off and I ran to my son Luke. He was lying there borderline unconscious, and I picked him up and ran home and got him inside. The police were already there by the time we got back to the house, and Luke had to go to the hospital. He turned out to be okay, but he had bruises all over his body and scratches on his neck and face. My son almost and very well could have died from asphyxiation. As for the men who kidnapped him, they never caught him. I gave the police the best description of him, but he's still out there somewhere. He was lucky I didn't shoot him in the fucking head. Sometimes I wish I would have. Luke said he thought the man was me and that he was dressed up with a ski mask, and somehow the man convinced him to unlock the window and to go with him. My son is probably going to remember this for the rest of his life. I know my wife and I will. This happened on Christmas Eve when I was 23 years old, 3 years ago. I lived alone in a house that I was renting at the time. I had been spending time with some family all afternoon, and I didn't end up making it home until later into the evening. I was really tired because my sleep schedule was all out of whack, and I remember I had a particularly stressful work week the previous week, so I was just ready to go to bed. Usually I shower when I get home and hop in bed afterwards and turn some Netflix on or YouTube. But not today. I was so beat that I went straight to sleep after checking my phone for a few minutes. I had to wake up early for Christmas morning anyways. I think I fell asleep just after 8 o'clock. It couldn't have been more than a few hours that I awoke to footsteps that were coming from upstairs. Just to give you a little bit of an idea, my bedroom was downstairs in the basement. I'm a really light sleeper, so I woke up fairly quick, I think. I woke up in a panicked state, and immediately I realized someone had just broken into my house. First thing I thought to do was call the police, but my phone wasn't picking up any service. I get horrible service sometimes in my basement, and this was one of those times. I rushed over to the laundry room that was also downstairs and only a room away, and I grabbed about a foot-long steel pipe that I could use as a self-defense weapon. Of course, I didn't want it to come to that, but I had to be ready. I hid behind some clothes I had hanging up in the laundry room, and it wasn't that great of a hiding spot, honestly. But it was the only place I could come up with to hide. I must have called the police a dozen times, and each time it would ring only once and it would make this beeping noise my phone would make when it had no signal. I was starting to get pretty pissed off, and I let my anger get a hold of me. The noise upstairs continued, and by now it had escalated to more than just footsteps. I kept hearing this noise that sounded like someone was pounding on something. Then everything got eerily quiet for only a couple of minutes. Whoever broke into my house was now trying to make their way downstairs. I must have locked the door though, because whoever it was wasn't able to get the door open. I have a bad habit of making sure that the doors are always locked. I'm not so sure how bad of a habit it is though, considering it potentially saved my life. The man started yelling and screaming, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. It didn't even sound like he was speaking English. He then knocked on the door, and then he attempted to break it down by what sounded like him kicking it over and over. Luckily, he wasn't able to get the door open. I pretty much sat there and waited for the nightmare to be over with. I waited until I felt like he was gone before I even thought about walking upstairs. I probably waited for over a half hour after the last sound I heard from upstairs. I finally worked up the courage to walk up the stairs and look around the house for him. I was just waiting for him to pop out at any moment, and I would have had to fight for my life. But he never did. He was gone. The only thing he left behind was a piece of paper that he taped to the fridge that said, and I quote, "I'll be back," with a bunch of smiley faces on it. I didn't care too much for his little threat, and I called the police to make a report on what happened. I had absolutely nothing on the man though. I didn't know what he looked like at all, and I had no idea of his age or anything that could even give the slightest detail of the man. So obviously, there wasn't much the police could do except reassure me and boost my confidence by telling me that everything would be okay and that they will catch him sooner or later. It really freaks me out too, because even still to this day, I have no idea how he got inside. There were no signs of a break-in or anything. I had an incident that happened exactly a year later on Christmas Eve as well. I wasn't home. I was actually at my girlfriend's house visiting with her family when I received a notification on my phone on my Ring doorbell app that said somebody was at my front door. I opened up the notification right away, and there was a man on my front porch trying to get my attention or break into my house or something. I know deep down in my heart that it had to have been the same guy that broke into my house the year before. He had this huge creepy smile on his face, but he seemed to have been confused by the Ring camera I had. Like he hadn't seen me before or something. I then yelled at him and told him the police were on the way and that if he doesn't leave he's going to be arrested, to never come back again. Well, surprisingly it worked when I threatened him, because he ran off and I haven't heard or seen anything from him since. I called the police and I was able to give them a description finally, but still, since the man was gone by the time the police arrived, there wasn't much they could do. Now every year around Christmas especially, I get paranoid that he's going to come back. I'm set to move in about 3 months though, so hopefully I can finally start feeling safe in my own home. My name's Ethan. And yeah, I've heard it all before. You're too old for this. But they don't get it. The Grinch isn't just a character to me. He's something more. I mean, I'm a sucker for this stuff. Posters, toys, collector's items, you name it, I have it. My house is literally like the Grinch exploded in it. People tend to think it's quirky or weird, but they don't see what I see. The Grinch was clever and misunderstood, a genius. But things went sideways last Christmas. It started in a flea market, just walking through, scouring over all the tables for any Grinch. I saw it. An old dusty Grinch toy perched atop some wonky table. It was unlike any other I've ever seen though. Fur matting, green plotting instead of richly vibrant, and eyes in glow kinda almost like they're breathing in the dim light. When I picked it up, it was warm. Not warm like it sat out in the sun all day, warm like if it were alive. My chest constricted, and I reassured myself that it was just my excitement. How much? Asked the seller. The old man behind the table didn't even look at me. Take it. He muttered. No charge. I should have walked away, but I didn't. I sat the toy on my shelf, right in the middle of my Grinch collection. It was perfect there. Too perfect. As I gazed at it, a creeping, crawling feeling went up my spine as if it looked back at me. Then the whisper started. I thought it might just be the wind, or perhaps the neighbors, but it was whispered inside the house. Faint, soft, just out of earshot. They seemed to come from nowhere, and from everywhere, and it only got worse. Every time I passed a mirror, my reflection seemed off. My nose looked long, my cheeks hollow. One night, I swore I saw my face twist into a Grinch-like grin before snapping back to normal. The decorations around my house seemed different somehow. The Grinches on my shelves seemed to shift when I wasn't paying attention. Their smiles grew thinner, their eyes deeper. I tried to think myself into agreement with my mind, but the fact remained within me. I knew. And then the dreams came. I saw him every night. The Grinch. But it was not the playful mischievousness of his daily endeavors. He was taller and leaner, his green fur darker, more patchy. His grin went on too long, and jagged and sharp were his teeth. I envisioned him standing at the foot of my bed. He watched me, whispering things I couldn't understand. "Follow me," he said one night in a deep guttural voice. I wake up drenched in sweat with my heart racing. That was when I started digging. I needed answers. I spent days researching and surfing all obscure forums and old books dedicated to Christmas folklore. And that's how I found the legend of a cursed Grinch toy. According to the stories, it wasn't only a collector's item, it was a trap. It pulled people in, feeding on their obsession, slowly turning them into what they so admired. Something inside me didn't want to believe it, but the signs were there. Whispers, distorted reflections, and dreams. I tried to eliminate the toy. I threw it in the trash, but the next morning, there it was back on my shelf. I burned it, but it came back. Its fur singed, its grin even wider. I was losing my mind. Christmas Eve. That's when I finally saw myself. This time, however, it wasn't me. The face in the mirror was green, and its grin was stitched into its cheeks. I screamed and punched the glass, but the image didn't break. That's when I realized I wasn't just seeing the Grinch, I was becoming him. The next thing I remember is standing in my bathroom staring into the mirror with a knife in my hand. Blood was dripping from my cheeks because I carved out a grin. All I can recall is looking back at an awful distorted grin. Now I'm here, locked away in this mental institution. They say I'm dangerous, that I hurt myself and scared my neighbors. But they don't understand. The Grinch is real. He's here. I can hear the guards talking about me every now and then. Poor guy. One of them said, his obsession destroyed him. The other replied, yeah, and cause a grin into their own face. They don't know what I know. They can laugh all they want. But every night, I see him, the Grinch, standing in the corner of my room, his grin wider than ever. He's waiting. For what, I don't know. But I can feel he's not done with me yet. I visited my parents for Christmas last year. It had been snowing since October, so my dad helped me switch over to winter tires over a month earlier. That made me think I didn't have to worry much about road conditions. My family and I had a wonderful Christmas together, but I had plans to go on vacation with a friend the following day. Our flight was scheduled for that afternoon. I left in the early morning, still dark out, so I could have ample time to prepare for the trip and arrive at the airport. Unfortunately, I hadn't paid enough attention to how much snow had fallen the previous night. I quickly realized that the winter tires alone might not cut it, but I was determined to get home. Once there, I could just get a ride. Unfortunately, there was a dark and lonely 20 miles between me and my destination. I pressed on at a cautious speed. Everything seemed fine until I crossed over a small bridge. Then, out of nowhere, I hit a patch of black ice. My car rotated one way and started sliding the other way, completely out of my control. I rammed into a pile of snow immediately. But thankfully, I wasn't going fast enough to cause any damage to the car. On the other hand, the snow caved in under one tire, causing me to get stuck. I tried not to panic. I had never had to get myself out of snow before, but my dad told me how. I stepped out though. All my confidence was blown away by the brutally cold wind, and the realization that I was completely alone on that stretch of road. When I refocused, I grabbed all the floor mats from the back seat and the box of cat litter from the trunk. I got on my hands and knees and cleared a path for my back tires, packing down the softer snow into hard ice. I laid down the litter with mats and tried as hard as I could to cram them under the tires. I was working under the light of a single flashlight, feeling like I was on a fast track to hypothermia as my fingers started to get stiff and my face went numb. Just as I was ready to give it a try, I saw a pair of headlights approaching behind me. I flagged them down, trying to warn them about the ice. They seemed to go over it with no problem, and as they pulled over next to me, I saw that they had chains in their tires. It was another larger SUV, driven by a scruffy middle-aged man with gloves on who offered to help. I declined, saying I was already taking care of it. But then he took a glance at my setup and said there was no chance of that working. He hopped out of his car, revealing a stained jacket over a large gun, saying he helped tow me from the ditch. I told him again that I had things handled, but he glared at me, demeaning. He said a little lady like me couldn't handle anything on her own, and that I was no good to anyone if I froze to death. I was offended. My teeth were chattering so much I couldn't go off on him for being such a chauvinist, and what I could get out was lost in the wind. All I could do was watch him pop open his trunk and pull out a long chain, which he looped through an attachment point under the front bumper of my car. Then, he told me to kneel there and hold it while he grabbed something to lock it in place. I managed to ask him why he didn't just tie the chain in a knot, but he snapped at me asking if I knew anything about towing cars. I tried to snap back by saying I never asked him for a tow, but he pointed at my floor mats and cat litter and said it was the stupidest, most brain-dead method of getting out of snow. If he left, he said I'd be stuck there all morning until the snow plows came to bury me. In the freezing cold, looking at my handiwork once again, I had to admit the tow seemed like a better option. I swallowed my pride and did as he said, kneeling at the hood of the car with the chain in my hands. A moment later, the man returned, handing me an open padlock. I noticed he was holding one hand behind his back, which as he stood looming over me, was no good omen. My inner voice was screaming at me at this point that my initial feelings about this guy were right. However, I tried to keep going along with things while still being extra cautious. So I kept one eye on him as I turned away to secure the chain. I only got the lock through one link before I saw him raise his arms over his head out of the corner of my eye. I looked over my shoulder and saw a hammer ready to strike me in the back of the head. I quickly jumped out of the way just before he slammed into the bumper. I yanked the chain out from under my car, whipping it across his face as it went to hit me again. He shouted in pain as I ran around to the passenger side, jumping in and locking the doors just moments before he reached the window and started hammering the glass. I crawled over to the driver's seat, praying I wouldn't be stuck. I heard my dad's voice again saying, "Don't floor it." So against my panicking instincts, I feathered the throttle until I felt the tires catch, and then I finally slammed on the gas pedal. I roared out of the ditch, speeding off to safety. The creep didn't come after me, but he smashed my window. When I got home, I called the police immediately and reported everything. But since I didn't have the license plate, they didn't really do much. The rest of my day was very strange, trying to go through with my trip after what happened. It's horrible to think that there's a kind of person in this world that goes around looking for people in need of help, just to take advantage of their vulnerability. I used to work at a 7-Eleven that closed at midnight on Christmas Eve. I worked their closing shift one year. I wasn't supposed to be alone, but my coworker no-call no-show. The night was painfully slow. After 11:30, no more people were coming in, so I started getting ready to close. I got almost everything done, then I went to count the register. I was about to open the drawer when I heard a faint noise coming from outside. It sounded like jingle bells. As I paused to listen to it, The sound got louder and closer. I looked outside and saw a man dressed as Santa Claus. He was crossing the street, heading right for the store. While he walked, he shook a leather strap of jingle bells in one hand. He was staring right at me, even at a distance into the glass door. I could tell. He came all the way up to it. Then he stopped just outside. He went silent, no longer shaking his bells, just staring at me. He had a strange look in his eyes. It wasn't like a crazy or high person. It was different. They were so empty, yet so full of joy. I looked away at the clock. It was 11:57, so I couldn't borrow him from the store. Against my better judgment, I welcomed him in. He opened the door and took one step inside, then stepped on the floor mat, still staring at me. He made a sudden and unnerving series of deep shouts. Boo ho ho. It took me a moment to realize that was his version of ho ho ho. It sounded like one of those holiday greeting cards with a worn-out tape recording. Standing in the same spot, he asked what a little boy like me was still doing out. I replied that I was working and the store closed at midnight, but he said I was being naughty and needed to go to sleep so he could put my presents under the tree. I kept being straight with him and said there was no tree and that he needed to buy something. To that, he scoffed and said Santa Claus never buys anything on Christmas. No. Good little boys and girls are supposed to leave milk and cookies out for him. That's when he raised his strap of jingle bells and shook it as he started walking. He took the last cookie on display that I was saving for myself. Then he went over to the coolers. He grabbed a bottle of whole milk, cracked it open, then proceeded to unwrap the cookie and cram the whole thing into his mouth in about 2 bites, washing it down with an entire bottle of milk. I shouted at him that he was going to have to pay for that, but he just glanced over at me and jingled his stupid bells again. After clearing his throat, he thanked me for the milk and cookies, but told me that I still had to go to sleep if I wanted to receive my present. I said I wasn't going to play his game and that in 1 minute I was going to kick him out. But he just rang his bells again, then said he could be very patient. We locked eyes for the next 60 seconds. When the clock struck midnight, I told him the store was closed, and without skipping a beat, he started violently shaking his bells and screamed, "Merry Christmas," at the top of his lungs. I got fed up and went to confront him. I pointed to the door and told him to leave. Instead of listening, he shook his damn bells again and spoke to me like a child. He said he was proud of me for staying up all the way until midnight to see Santa putting out presents. But it was time for me to go to sleep unless I wanted to be put on the naughty list. I finally lost my cool and shouted in his face to get the hell out. In response, he took the strap of bells in 2 hands, holding them horizontally at chest height as he stepped forward to close the gap between us. I started backpedaling toward the register, not taking my eyes off him as he followed mere inches away. I told him he didn't have to pay, but he didn't care. He just told me it was my bedtime. I kept trying to reason with him, saying I still had to close the store. But then the man raised his voice, scolding me for talking back to him. I apologized, but he said it was already too late. I was on the naughty list, and since I wouldn't go to bed on my own, Santa would have to put me to bed himself. And I was no longer going to get what I wanted for Christmas. Before I could ask what he meant, I realized I was backed up against the counter and he was right on top of me. Suddenly, he pushed me down and wrapped the leather strap of bells around my neck, squeezing and pressing into it with all his weight. I kicked and fought against him, trying to pull the strap away, but I was completely overpowered. All I could hear was him screaming, "Ho ho ho, Merry Christmas." As the seconds passed, my vision faded and my strength vanished. The last thing I remember is him getting in my face and whispering. Nothing was stirring, not even a mouse. Then, everything went black. I could no longer feel. I don't know how long I was like that, but to my surprise, I woke up in a daze. I hadn't been moved, but now there was a horrid sensation in my mouth. I grabbed for it and pulled out a dead rat. I threw it across the store. Looking at it, I realized that its entire nose and mouth were covered in red wax, like it had been suffocated to death prior to being stuffed in my mouth. I would have taken a lump of coal in my mouth over a dead Rudolph rat any day. When I got up, I called the police. Apparently, the Santa Claus guy had been terrorizing and assaulting people with his demented Santa Claus act all night. But my case appeared to be the worst. I always hoped they would find the guy, but many years had passed, and I hadn't heard anything about it. I live in a 2-bedroom condo with my girlfriend and a roommate. We had downstairs neighbors for a while, another couple and a single guy. We would hear them arguing while we were on the porch. Things were ugly. The first one to leave was their roommate. He was just a regular guy who was done hearing the couple scream at each other all day. Not long after that, the couple split up, and the man's wife left him. With nobody to help pay rent, we saw the eviction notice on his door within a month. I was coming home from work when I saw him loading his stuff into his truck. He saw me as I was trying to go up the stairs and flagged me down to talk. He introduced himself as Aaron. After telling me his sob story, he begged me to let him crash upstairs on my couch as he had nowhere to go. I told him I would consult with the others in the house. My girlfriend and our roommate, both women, weren't exactly comfortable with the idea. We discussed it though. It was December. He'd be freezing, sleeping in his car and completely alone for Christmas. In the end, the nail in the coffin is when we peeked out the window and saw him break down crying. We just felt bad for him. He was elated when we told him the news. I cooked us all some dinner that night. He told us everything about what had happened with his wife, really talking our ears off while we were trying to eat. We had only given him a week to stay, so we figured we could live through whatever baggage he came with. As it turned out, we couldn't. He trashed the living room and the kitchen, raided all our food, and left our roommate's bathroom a mess. Then, on the third day, we were all in the living room together, drinking heavily and watching a movie. The three of us trying everything to forget Aaron was there. While he was drunk, Aaron made a lot of weird comments centered around how cute my girlfriend and I were as a couple, how he missed being with someone, and that it would make a lot of sense if he started dating our roommate and moved in with us. We ignored all that. But later, our roommate said she wanted him out of the house. We agreed, and I said I would break it to him in the morning. That wasn't the end of it though. In the middle of the night, we woke up to our roommate screaming. We rushed over to her room and saw Aaron just standing inside her room. Our roommate said he'd opened the door and stared at her for a whole minute. She discreetly took out her phone and snapped a picture, which she showed to us then. It was downright chilling. Just the image of a silhouette in her doorway. Aaron's excuse is that her cat was meowing to get out. But if that were the case, he wouldn't have stepped in. Which was when she started screaming. We were all still drunk from the heavy drinking, so tensions were high. I kicked Aaron out right then and there. He protested, of course, but I just picked up his stuff and took them down to his truck. I saw to it that he drove off before I went back upstairs. A few days passed, and we gradually put our apartment back together. But only for strange messes to keep showing up. Like the ghost of Aaron was still rigging the fridge at night and leaving crumbs everywhere. We were all irritated and started accusing each other, but nobody owned up to any of it. It wasn't just that though. Whenever I was home alone, I kept hearing noises in the ceiling. I kept trying to record it, but the sound never showed up on video. My girlfriend and our roommate didn't take me seriously. To our knowledge, we didn't even have an attic. Then, Christmas Day came. We all got up early. The first thing I noticed when I sat down in the toilet was that the bathroom smelled like stale piss. I couldn't find the source anywhere. I sprayed some deodorizer and tried to ignore it. But when my girlfriend got out, she complained about it too. All throughout the day, the smell just got worse and worse. I tried to deep clean everything, but the stench lingered on. Eventually, I got frustrated and gave up and sat down in the toilet, exhausted. A few seconds later, a drop of liquid hit my nose. I instantly knew it was piss. I looked up and saw a large stain on the ceiling, and piss was dripping down from it. I went absolutely mad and looked for a way to get up there. I found it in my closet, hidden behind clothes. A small hatch in the ceiling, attic access. I could barely breathe as I got a flashlight and made my way up the ladder. I poked my head in, holding my breath and scanning with the light. I spotted 2 buckets above where the toilet was. One was on its side. Between them, I saw a face. It was Aaron. I screamed at him to get the hell out of my house, but he got up and started coming over to me, begging and pleading to let him stay. He said he was terrified of being alone and just wanted to be with us. He was so pale and thin and greasy, like Gollum. I raced down the ladder and slammed it shut. I called the police immediately and had them drag Aaron out, kicking and screaming. He got the best ending he could have. A roof over his head and 3 meals a day, plus all the love from his cellmate he could ever want and more. Still can't believe him though. He had a piss bucket up there, and he just let it fill up until he knocked it over on accident one day, leading to his piss dripping down into the apartment. We had all forgotten about it. He slipped in when we were all at work and left the door unlocked by accident. Lord knows none of us will ever do that again. I know he was sneaking around, so I can't help but wonder how close he got to my roommate, or if he did anything to her. When I was just a few months old, my parents adopted a puppy. They wanted me to grow up with a friend to help me learn boundaries and discipline and all that, as well as to have a playmate. My dog's name was Charlie. He was a golden retriever, so by the time I was 9, he was getting old. That was another reason we adopted him, so I could learn about death and how to go through the emotions related to it. My parents are pretty hardcore like that, I guess. Charlie was slower than he used to be, and he was having trouble holding his bladder. He slept in my bed every night, and I didn't mind getting up to let him out whenever he needed to go. One of those nights was Christmas Eve. I woke up sometime after midnight, noticing that Charlie had hopped out of bed and was whimpering at my door. I got up and went downstairs with him to let him out into the backyard. As I walked into the living room, I saw something in passing that I didn't even register. All the presents at the base of the Christmas tree were gone. Neither of us noticed. I was tired and Charlie only had one thing on his mind. I opened the door and let Charlie out, but I stayed in. I knew he would only take a few seconds, and it was a cold night. After a quick leak, he came running back. He climbed up onto the deck, went through the back door, but stopped right as he stepped inside. The door into the garage was to his side. He walked over to it, stuck his nose under it, and started sniffing at it intensely. I let him sniff for a few seconds, but it didn't take long for his typical curiosity to change into something else. He started whimpering again, pacing back and forth and sniffing more and more aggressively. Finally, he looked back at me, sat down, then groaned with a huge yawn. I knew Charlie wanted in there, and that he wouldn't rest until I let him. I opened the door for him and flipped the light switch, only for my jaw to hit the floor as the lights came on. There was a man dressed in a ski mask and all black trying to break into my dad's Mercedes. There was a bag full of our stuff at his feet, which he spilled as he freaked out because of the lights. Turning around to see me and Charlie in the doorway, Charlie started barking like mad and I screamed for help from my parents. In a split second, the burglar ran up to us, grabbed me and put his hand over my mouth. Then he kicked Charlie down and took me into the garage. He dragged me back to the car as Charlie whimpered horribly. I was thrown to the ground so hard the wind was knocked out of me. Then the man told me to shut up. If I screamed for help again, he was going to kill me. I complied out of fear, but I began to cry. Charlie was on the other side of the door and started barking again. But now there was a tone in his voice, some mix of anger and desperation and pain. I was terrified and heartbroken at the same time. The burglar kept trying to get into my dad's car, jimmying some thin piece of metal under the window. He wasn't able to get in before my parents arrived at the door with Charlie. They opened it up and my dad started to shout and race in, but the burglar grabbed me again and put me in a chokehold. My dad stopped in his tracks and his face turned from rage to panic in an instant. I didn't know why until I realized there was a knife against my neck. The man told my parents to stay back, give him the keys to the car and let him drive away, or he would slit my throat. My mother was holding Charlie back. He was going insane. When my dad told her to go get the keys, her hand slipped and she let go of Charlie's collar. He charged at us with speed I hadn't seen him move with in years. The burglar took the knife away from my neck. I knew he was going to point it at Charlie, so I grabbed for it and pulled it back toward me just as Charlie slammed into it. My fingers were sliced open as I held it with all my strength. Charlie was ripping into the man's legs, tearing through his pants within seconds before my dad arrived. My dad pulled me and Charlie away in one motion, and before I could even get to my feet, before the burglar could even react, my dad was on him. He took the burglar to the ground and started laying into him. The next few moments, to me, might somehow be the most traumatic. I just watched, holding on to Charlie as my dad beat every single ounce of hatred and violent instinct he ever had into this guy. It wasn't long before he was begging my dad to stop. But then it was just silence as he went unconscious. Yet even at that point, the beating continued. Only when my mom came rushing back in was my father restrained. By then, the burglar's ski mask was soaked in blood. I'm glad I never saw what his face looked like underneath. That's when the shock really set in, and I have little memory of what happened next. All I know is the burglar spent a long time in the hospital before prison, and my dad never wanted to talk about what he did to him. We got all our stuff back because of my dad, but I know it was the fact that the burglar threatened my life that sent my dad into that ultra-violent protective state of mind. He could have easily killed the guy, but thankfully my mom stopped him in time. I'm also happy to say that Charlie wasn't seriously hurt. My neighbors across the street moved in about 2 years ago. They were a reclusive middle-aged man and his teenage son who was a bit younger than me. At the start of the school year, he became a freshman in my high school. This was the first time I actually saw him. It didn't take long to learn his name, though. He was Marty, and he was a magnet for bullying. This made Marty a very sad, lonely person. By December, the effect on Marty was so visible that my mom spotted it from across the street one day. She asked me about him, so I told her what I knew, which made her seem quite heartbroken. She suggested that I go over to his house and try to be friends with him, but I didn't want to do that. If people thought we hung out, I was finished. Unfortunately, my mom basically forced me to in the end. I went over to Marty's house shortly after and knocked on the door. His father answered, blasted me with the stench from inside the house. Behind him, all I could see was an insane amount of hoarding. When I got past him, Marty's father and I introduced ourselves. I said I was going to school with his son and that maybe we should hang out. Marty's father, Gerard, invited me inside, smiling with yellow teeth and cracked lips. He told me that he and his son loved company, with deeply uncomfortable emphasis on the word love. Then, he opened the door further, and was almost about to touch my shoulder and take me inside. I stepped back, making him frown instantly. I tried to say I would rather do something outside like play basketball, but Gerard said their most favorite thing to do was entertain company. But sadly, they rarely had guests. There was no way I was going to step into that trash heap, though. While I tried to come up with excuses, Marty appeared behind his father and asked with genuine excitement if they were having company. His father said that depended on what I said next. I was petrified. Then, a sound bellowed out from deep inside the house, the echoing of a weak droning line. I took another step back, no longer trying to hide my emotions. Marty and Gerard turned their heads to the right. Marty started walking in that direction, then Gerard slammed the door. I hurried back home to ask my mom if she was sure Marty's father didn't have a wife. She said no, so I told her what I heard in their house. She said not to jump to any conclusions, and that it could have been the TV or a new girlfriend. I didn't like leaving it alone, but I couldn't convince her that something was wrong. I tried going about my business. But the next day, Marty sought me out at school and kept asking me to come over to his house. I asked him about the noise I heard, but he said he couldn't tell me. Then he asked me again to come over, telling me I would never want to leave if I did. People started to notice us together, so I left the conversation and avoided him all day. I stayed away from him for 2 more days. But then, Friday, Marty got off the bus right behind me. His father cut me off, getting in front of me. They boxed me in as Gerard told me that I was going to stay at his house and have the time of my life. I told him to leave me alone, but then Gerard grabbed my arm. I shouted at the top of my lungs, causing a scene for the other students, which worked in getting Gerard to let me go. I ran home and told my mom immediately. and this time she agreed that it was a good idea to call the police. I begged them to search his house because I thought they were keeping somebody in there, but the cops said there wasn't enough evidence. However, on their way to talk to them, I watched them from my kitchen as one of the cops stopped by the trash can sitting on the curb. His face scrunched up, like he smelled something. He lifted the lid and recoiled, then took a pocket knife and cut open a bag. He looked like he threw up in his mouth before he called his buddies over. My curiosity was killing me. I ran out of the house and barged through the circle of cops around the trash can to get a glimpse. They took me away immediately, but I saw enough. The can was full of trash bags, and the one that had been cut wide open had a chopped up body in it. The discovery led to a full search of the house. The news coverage was all anyone watched for the entirety of Christmas break. They discovered a spot on the basement floor, the only clear surface in the entire house, where it looked like someone had been hung. There were 4 steel chains bolted into the bare concrete, far enough apart to indicate the victim was forced to permanently lay flat on their back with their arms and legs stretched out in an X shape. Gerard and his son kept the victim, a man about Gerard's age, for an entire year, keeping him barely alive by force feeding him with a tube. The large and well-defined stain of defecation indicated that the victim was forced to go where they lay, and were never clean. That, and the large stain of blood meant that they had been executed and dismembered in the same spot where they were tortured for 12 agonizing months. Gerard had gotten sloppy, allowing the victim to be heard while I was at the door, causing Gerard to panic and kill them. Then he lazily assumed the garbage truck would take the body away. By pure luck, the garbage trucks were delayed that day until Saturday. I'm sure that if I entered their house that day, I would have been the replacement guest. If I'd called the cops the first time, that man's life might have been saved. Nobody knows what else Gerard and Marty did to him just yet, but the way they talked about entertaining company makes me think they did little else but torture him and drive him insane for their own enjoyment. So this happened to me almost 7 years ago now. I should give some background info before getting into things. At the time this all happened, I was around 16 years old, and I had a friend that I'll call Karen, who was dating a boy named John. At this point in time, Karen and John had been dating for maybe 6 months, and after going out with Karen and John on many occasions, they decided they wanted me to hook up with John's friend, Cameron. At this point in time, I had met Cameron in person once. He was pretty nice, and I gave him my social media, and we had chatted a couple of times. It's important to note that he didn't have my number or even know where I live. Now it's time for the story. Fast forward to one night, maybe a week or 2 after I met Cameron. I'm laying in bed, and it's about 2 or 3 in the morning, and I get a call from an unknown number. Thinking, why the hell is an unknown number calling me at this time at night? I decide to answer it and see who it is. So I answer the phone to say hi, and the man responds saying hi back. Since I didn't recognize the voice on the other end, I asked the person who they were. Instead of giving me an answer to this question, the man on the line tells me to look outside my window. Thinking this is probably a prank call, I tell the man to F off and I hang up the phone. Once I did this, the number called back again, but I didn't answer it. The person then proceeds to call me another 4 times until I finally answer the phone. Which again, I ask who the heck is calling. This time the person responds and tells me that one of my friends gave him my number, and that I'm the guy he's been talking to. At this point, my stupid 16-year-old mind is trying to rationalize this, and the only person I can think of is Cameron. Before I can say anything to this person, he again tells me to look outside my window. I begin hearing noises outside the window. Now I should mention that my room is right beside my parents' room. And being stupid, my first thought was that this fool was going to wake them up, and that I'd never hear the end of it. Let me tell you, that thought soon turned into the last thing I would worry about that night. Anyway, at this point, I'm also starting to get creeped out, and thinking to myself, if this is Cameron, and Karen did give him my number, how the hell would he know where I lived? So I reply to the man and say, Cameron? The man says yes, and tells me to look on my window. I reply to him to go home and hang up the phone again. Weirded out, I decide I'm going to get up and go into my basement and call Karen, so that hopefully my parents don't hear me talking from my room. This is really important because again in my basement, I have to pass a door that is partially made of glass. So I get downstairs and call her, and she answers, clearly half asleep. I tell her about the unknown call, which I'm assuming is from Cameron. Now he's telling me to look out my window because he's outside. And on top of this, that I can hear someone out there. Karen, now clearly awake, tells me that she has never given Cameron my number or address, and calls John quickly from her home phone to see if maybe he did. At this point, John answers and tells Karen that not only had he not given my information out, but he is with Cameron. So they tell me if someone is outside, I need to hang up and call the police immediately. So I hang the phone up, and before I can even go to dial for anyone, I get another call. Guess who? Unknown number. So I stupidly answer again, and before I get a word in, the man tells me that he knows I'm in my basement, and that he saw me walking by my back door. Now I'm clearly disturbed, as I did just walk by my back door to get downstairs, so I know someone is actually outside. Again, before I could say anything, the man told me to come outside. So stupidly, I tell the person I'm calling the police and I hang up the phone. Why I hadn't called the police at this point, I really don't know. Probably because I was 16, stupid, and literally in panic mode. Not more than a minute later, I get another call. I answer again, and the man tells me to come outside or he's coming inside to get me. Clearly panicking at this point, I had this deep gut feeling that if I go outside, I'm never coming back. However, I do have to go by the door again to get back upstairs, and that was equally terrifying me. So I hung up the phone again and mustered up the courage to run upstairs, because the last place I wanted to be was in the part of my house where no one else was in. I keep getting more calls. Unknown number, unknown number. Again, my 16-year-old self stupidly answers. This time the voice on the phone sounds shook. Says to me that police stopped him outside my house, and that they want to speak to me to make sure I know him. And the phone then gets pressed off to someone who identifies himself by name, which I no longer remember, and asks if I know the man outside my house. He says my house number and street. I quickly tell the voice on the phone I have no idea who the person calling me is, and I hang up the phone. I never got another call again. However, I did sit there all night holding a bat, and I had problems sleeping for months. I should also mention, I didn't have many friends at this point in my life. And looking back on this night, I thought maybe this was a prank taken too far. However, I begged a few friends I did have for months to admit that one of them was the person who pulled this off. And to this day, they all insist none of them did this. So whatever got this person to stop calling me, thank you, God. Back in 2007, shortly after my 15th birthday, my mom was out of town for a few days on a business trip. My mom and I lived alone in a small house in a neighborhood that was on the sketchier end of decent. And that fact, combined with her paranoia about me being home alone, longer than 4 or 5 hours, meant that I had to stay over at a friend's house while she was gone. This friend's house was across the street and over one house from my own, and the place my mom was going was only about 2 hours away. And I had gotten a bug up my ass about being treated like the young woman that everyone kept calling me. So, for the week leading up to the trip, I was moaning and groaning about being old enough to take care of myself, and insisting that I could just check in with my friend's parents every now and then. But in truth, my house was pretty creepy at night, even when my mom was there with me. And I'd found out the day my mom was scheduled to leave, my friend had somehow gotten her hands on a PlayStation 3. So it didn't take me too long to get over being unfairly babysat. At around 11 of the last night I was there, we ended up back inside my friend's room, screwing around with the brand new flip phone that I had gotten for my birthday. Her parents had gone out hours earlier after buying us a pizza for dinner and probably weren't going to be back for at least an hour. And we got bored downstairs with her one PS3 game that we'd been playing for days already. It was too late to call any of our friends, but I knew my mom was coming home tomorrow morning at some ungodly hour. And I knew that she had this thing about her answering machine. No matter how tired she was, no matter where she had gone back from, if there were any messages on the answering machine, she'd listen to all of them. So being the bored 15-year-olds that we were, my friend and I decided to leave a message or two for my mom to find in the morning. We called my home phone and put it on speaker, cracking up and trying to figure out what our message is going to be about. It normally took 5 rings for a call to go to the machine, but on a 3rd ring, the phone picks up and we hear, "Hello?" The voice sounded like he belonged to some 60-year-old guy who had been smoking for the last 40 years of his life. But even past that, there was this menace to his voice. Can't describe it exactly, but sounded very cold and very dangerous. Sort of voice where if you heard it on the street, you'd want to get away from that person immediately. I looked at my friend, and her eyes were huge and her face was completely pale, and I'm sure I didn't look any better. Neither of us could get it together enough to say anything in response. "Hello," he said again. There was a pause and I tried to squeak out something along the lines of, "Who the hell are you and why are you in my house?" But then he said in a very low voice, "You shouldn't have called." There was some sort of slam and the call disconnected. I immediately dropped my phone and proceeded to freak out, as did my friend. She asked me if I knew who that was and I said no. Of course, I didn't know the creepy-ass guy answered my phone at 11 at night. We checked the call log to see if we'd accidentally called the wrong number. But no, it was the right number. We were so shaken up that we couldn't immediately figure out who we should call or what we should do. If we should call the cops or call my mom, or even call my friend's parents, or even just run around making sure all the doors and windows were locked or what. So we ended up sprinting around my friend's house, double-checking every lock we could check, while gasping out what happened to my friend's parents on the phone. So for 10 minutes, we were huddled in the far corner of my friend's room, basically under her bed, jumping every time we heard the house settle or one of our legs scraped on the carpet. You can imagine how freaked out we were when her parents rushed in and started rattling at her bedroom door, forgetting that it was locked on their orders. The cops got to my house not too long after her parents got home. To be honest, I don't really remember a lot of the specifics about what the cops were doing, mainly because I refused to step foot outside the house, but I remember that they asked my friend and I a lot of questions. We couldn't really give them a lot of information, sadly. Unfortunately, we called in from my friend's room, which was in the way back of her house, away from where we would have been able to see my house. And the dude with the creepy smoker's voice isn't a very helpful description to go off of when looking for someone. There wasn't really anything messed up and nothing was taken. But our wall-mounted corded phone was hanging off the hook and the phone base itself was cracked, like it had been smashed or something. Both my mom's room and my room also had some stuff moved around and displaced. Like someone was going through our drawers and stuff in our rooms. My mom got called at some point during all of this and managed to get home that night, very tired and very freaked out about what happened. The cops investigated the incident, but never came up with any answers. We weren't doing too well financially at that point, but we still managed to move across town within a few months of this happening. But the months between that night and the day we moved though, I slept like shit and I had really bad nightmares. I also flat out refused to be alone in the house, even if it was just for a couple of minutes. And I started getting really obsessive about double-checking the locks, a habit which has stuck around since this happened. Now that I've written this all out, I remember there's one thing I haven't told anyone about all this. Mostly because at the time, I thought that the whole thing might get blamed on me if I said anything. Earlier that day, I'd gone back over to my house to get a notebook of mine, full of writing that I wanted to show my friend. Nothing was obviously wrong as far as I could tell. The front door was locked when I got to it, and no signs of any tampering with it or any weirdness by the door. No noises from any part of the house. But the minute I stepped inside, something just felt off. It was really, really quiet, and I was getting chills all up and down my spine, and I had goosebumps all over. I tried to will myself just to get over it, to go back to my room and just get the notebook, but I couldn't make myself take more than a few steps into the house. I was too creeped out. I locked the door and I ran back across the street. When I got back to my friend's house, I kind of felt like an idiot, of course. Was I really such a wimp that I couldn't walk through my own house when it was empty? But looking back, well, who knows? Maybe my gut was right about something just not being right. It freaks me out even thinking about what could have happened if I'd ignored it and walked further inside. I've thought back on that moment a lot too, wondering if maybe I left the door open when I left, but there's just no way. I distinctly remember locking the deadlock, looking over my shoulder the whole time, because I had that burning, crawling feeling on the back of my neck that you get when you're being watched. And after the creepy call, I checked and I had my keys in my backpack. This started last Friday and has been going on for the past week. I am part of a church Facebook where you post your needs and people will fulfill if they can. Or you post something you have to offer and people reply if they need it. Take a penny, leave a penny style. Someone posted on Facebook that they needed an item that I happened to have, so I replied, stating I had one if they could have. Sent me a PM and we started to arrange for pickup. The guy then told me he had posted for a friend and it was his friend who would be taking it. We had to change pickup days because of some scheduling conflicts, so he said a different friend would be picking it up, because that was who was available to pick up that day. He asked for my phone number so they could let us know when they were on their way. I don't know if it's a crazy coincidence or not, but within 1 hour of giving my phone number, I got the first phone call. My phone rang from a restricted number, which I normally ignore, but for some reason I answered it. There was a man on the line talking in a low, deep, slow voice. Him. You call for the service? Me. Oh no, I'm sorry. I think you have the wrong number. No, I don't. You need the massage and the giant. You know what? Me. No. Then he hung up. At that point, I kind of laughed, thinking it was some teenage boys pranking me. But the more I thought about it, the more I was a little bothered. There was no giggling and no laughing. Like no amusement at all in the man's voice. Not only that, but I'm completely unlisted, so my phone number isn't available anywhere. I shrugged it off and continued on my weekend. I somewhat forgot all about the instance until on Tuesday, a block's number called me twice. I didn't answer either time and immediately got nervous and remembered to call on Friday when I saw the blocked number. On Wednesday, the number called me again, and this time I answered, thinking it was someone from my work. A computer was with our IT center, and it was this creepy guy again. This time he got straight to the point. Answered, hello, and he replied, I'm going to F you and your you-know-what. I asked how he got my number, and he hung up. It was definitely the same voice from the call on Friday. I remember that the first call came with an hour of giving out my phone number to the guy on Facebook. And immediately I got creeped out, because I also gave that person my address so they could come pick up the item. About 20 minutes after that phone call, my phone rang again with the blocked number, but I didn't answer. I decided at this point I want to confront the man on Facebook. I gave him my number and address out of kindness in the midst of giving him an expensive item that I happened to have an extra of, and almost immediately after doing so, I started getting these obscene calls. So I wrote to him on Facebook, explaining that I've been getting these calls, and asking if he shared my number with anyone. He wrote back apologizing, saying he was sorry I had to go through his friend, and said he gave my number to the two guys. The first one was supposed to pick up, Jose, and then to the second one who ended up picking up because of the reschedule, Mike. He gave me their names and phone numbers, asked that I please let him know if I find out they're behind it. My husband and I decided at this point that I need to download a call tracking app. I found one that will unblock blocked numbers, so I got it to try to use it next time they call. They didn't call at all the next day, but just about an hour ago, I got another call from them, and unfortunately, the app doesn't work. It just shows up, 9999. I answer and the conversation goes along the lines of, him, who is this? Me, no, who is this? Him, you know who I am? No, I don't, stop calling me. Him, but I want to taste you. Okay, how'd you get my number? Him, but don't you want me? No, I don't want you, stop calling me. Who is this? Is this Jose or Mike? Him, is this Michelle? No, my name is not Michelle. If you're trying to reach Michelle, you're calling the wrong person. Who is this? You know who I am, he says. How the hell did you get my number? Then he hangs up. At this point, I don't really know what to do. I keep telling myself it's just some idiot prank calling me, and I keep calling back because I get an answer. But in my gut, I don't feel like it is. There's no amusement in his voice at all. No laughing. Nothing. Just a low, slow, deep voice. The tracker didn't work, and he didn't respond at all when I gave the names the guy from Facebook gave me. But it is the guys from Facebook. They also know where I live, and that terrifies me. Not only for my own safety, but I also have 2 kids under 5 years old, and I babysit another 3-year-old during the week. I have small kids I'm responsible for. Part of me feels like it might not be them, but if it's not, it's an insane coincidence that the calls started the same day I gave him my number. When I was 18, almost 10 years ago, I had a phone call that completely changed my life. I got woken up at almost 6 a.m. by an unknown number. I figured it was my boyfriend, now husband, since his phone usually showed up as the famous unknown number. He usually called me before going to work around 7:30 a.m., but sometimes he'd call me at 6 o'clock if he wanted to talk to me while waking up. I answer and he says, "Hey baby," and I'm still half asleep but start talking. He tells me he has a little problem and that he's feeling really, So being 18 and just having started dating him recently, let's just say I was very willing to, So we start, and he tells me how he absolutely loved seeing me last weekend and how good I looked, and how he absolutely loves what I wore. He basically described what we had done during the weekend. If I remember properly, his parents were home for the weekend, and we had the house and the car to drive around, and we had lots of fun, obviously. And he was saying how much he loved some of the things I did to him. I replied, I was more and more awake, and we were having a really good time. Then I noticed it was almost 7 a.m., which is the time where he usually takes a shower and eats and gets ready to go out the door. And I basically asked him, "So, this is fun and all, but aren't you going to get ready for work?" This is giving me chills typing it, but he basically replied, no, I think I'll skip work today. How about I just come over?" Now the thing is, by then I was pretty awake, and although the voice that was talking to me was very similar to my boyfriend's, something threw me off. My boyfriend doesn't say the, no, like he did. Besides, I knew that unless he was sick, my boyfriend would never skip work because he was scheduled on shifts, and missing a shift was a big deal that could get him fired. I kind of froze, but he noticed it, and so he said, "Oh babe, yeah, you're right. I should start getting dressed. So you want me to come over?" By then, I swear that his voice was back to my boyfriend's voice, and I just felt silly. So what if you wanted to skip a day at work? Maybe he just really wanted to see me. So I tell him, "Yeah, sure, come over. It will only be us here." And he replied, "Great." Then he asked, "Where is it?" Wait, what? Obviously my boyfriend knows where I live. He had been coming over for weeks now. I laughed it off and I told him, "Ha, you know where it is." That's when he laughed. His laugh was absolutely not my boyfriend's laugh. I instantly told him, "You're not my boyfriend, are you?" He said, "Can you just hang on please? I need to grab something." Meanwhile, I get a text from my boyfriend. I figure that maybe, just maybe, this is a sick joke. Maybe he executed this joke perfectly. Maybe he's sick and his voice doesn't sound the same. The text from my boyfriend said, "I'm at the subway, going to work now, love you." I texted him saying, "Why are you texting me? We're talking right now." At which point, my actual boyfriend calls. He was very confused at first and figured someone had hacked into his MSN. When I told him it was by phone, he reassured me that he absolutely did not call me, and that whoever it was not him. He had to go as a subway train was there, but said that he would call as soon as he was at work. Then the other guy called back. I picked up and I asked him, "Who are you? What do you want?" I pretty much went crazy on him. He said that his name was Mike, and that we had met a long time ago, which was impossible because my phone number was fairly recent. That he just wanted to have fun, and that he didn't know I had a boyfriend. I asked him how he knew what I was wearing and what we did, and even how he got my phone number. He just said, "Where are you? Why don't we meet?" At which point I hung up. He called again, but I didn't answer. Within minutes, I called my mom to tell her what happened, and she told me to change my phone number and not to stay home alone. I changed my number right away, and I also alerted local police. They opened a file, but nothing ever came out of it. Still wonder how he knew what we did and what I was wearing, but my boyfriend swore at the time he would never let any of his friends know all that. But his parents' house did have lots of windows, and we weren't exactly careful. I had gotten home from work about an hour ago and was hunkered down inside for the night, sitting on my bed and watching TV. There was a storm outside. We don't usually get too many big thunderstorms around here, so nights like these always had me a bit nervous. A little bit into the storm, I heard something below me, like downstairs in one of the rooms. I thought it was just the house creaking, but feeling uneasy, I got up and checked anyway. There was nothing, so I filled up my water bottle and went back up to my room. I felt like I was only upstairs for another few minutes before I heard something again. It was a sound I was actually very familiar with and instantly recognized as one of my lamps in the living room falling over. I know it's weird how specific that is and how I'd know that, but the lamp was very unstable and would often fall if bumped into, and the spot I had it in, I'd bump into it pretty often. However, even though it was wobbly, it had never fallen over on its own before. I got back up, went downstairs to the living room, seeing the lamp laying in the middle of the room. I walked over and picked it up, but something just didn't seem right about this. The storm wasn't shaking the house very much at all, so the lamp falling over on its own just didn't make much sense to me. But I almost just had to assume that that's what it was, because there was nothing else to tell me otherwise. Even then, in my gut, I knew that that wasn't the case. I checked around the bottom floor for anything else, but eventually went back up to my room. I turned down the volume on the TV and listened to the storm a bit closer. Maybe it was worse than I thought. It was shaking the house. I was up there for a while longer, say 45 minutes, when I felt like the rain got louder all of a sudden. Maybe I didn't notice it before, but it sounded different, almost like it was in the walls. I'm not sure how to describe it, but I knew it was off. I opened my bedroom door and could immediately hear it more clearly, coming from downstairs. So I walked down there and tracked the sound down the hallway. At the end, near the kitchen, there was an awkward door to a storage closet that I knew had a window in it. I could hear the sound of rain pouring down from behind the closet door. I felt the anxiety build up in me as I opened it and saw the window wide open. Water was puddling on the boxes below the window, and rain was slapping against the windowsill. It had been at least 6 months since I'd last been in the storage closet, but I knew for sure I would have never touched that window, let alone left it open. I shut it to block out the sound of the rain, then faced the rest of my house, terrified and literally shaking. I had made the mistake of leaving my phone upstairs on my bed, so I could either run up and grab it or just run out of my house. I was honestly so scared I couldn't think straight. I carefully and quietly got my car keys from the kitchen, then started to slowly walk down the hallway toward the front door, hoping if someone was in here, they wouldn't hear me. I got about halfway there before a sudden burst of footsteps sprinted down the upstairs hallway right above me. They were going toward the stairs, and in a panic, I ran right to the front door. I could hear them getting close to the bottom as I ran out into the rain. I got into my car, backed out, and drove away without even looking back. I was able to dial 911 through my car. The officers found nothing but an empty house when they got there. Looking further into it, the wall in the closet that had the window ran along the end table that had the lamp on it. So likely the vibrations from trying to bust open the old window knocked over the lamp. Whoever had broken in didn't leave any clues on what they broke in for. It seemed like they had found somewhere upstairs to hide and were probably waiting for me to go to sleep before doing whatever they were going to do. Whether that was to rob me or what, I don't know. It's still really disturbing knowing there was someone walking around my home right outside my bedroom door that night while I was just sitting in my room watching TV. Even now, I randomly get unsettled when just hanging around my home, feeling like I'm not alone. It was a pretty typical night in the middle of March. I worked at a gas station at the time. Usually I did afternoon shifts, but every once in a while I'd cover for someone's overnight shift. I had gotten a call in the morning to come in from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m., all of which would count as overtime, so I quickly agreed. I got in and took over for the manager, then sat behind the front counter. It was pouring outside, and supposedly a big storm was gonna roll in later. seemed to keep most people at home because the gas station was dead. After sitting inside for an hour, I threw on my raincoat and ran outside to prepare the station for the storm. There were a bunch of loose things hanging around the pumps that needed to be brought inside. I started picking them up and running back and forth to drop them off, and as I was grabbing the last few, I noticed a man not too far away from the gas station. He was on the side of the street, pacing around and getting drenched by the rain. It was very unusual, though it looked like he was probably just waiting for a ride. I finished up and headed inside. 2 hours later, thunder started rumbling in the distance, and soon after, heavy winds and even harsher rain came swooping in. I knew it would be bad, but this was insane. The wind smacking against the sides of the building was actually making the whole room shake, and at one point I even thought the front doors were going to snap off the hinges because they swung open so fast. I hurried over and secured the bolt lock to keep them in place, then moved toward the back of the building and into the storage room away from all the windows, and I just waited. I want to say it was maybe 30 minutes after the storm has started. I was still in the back of the building when, through all the harsh noises, I heard a muffled sound. It wasn't until I heard it multiple times that I realized it was someone banging on the front doors. I left the storage room and looked down the sales floor. There was someone outside looking in at me and hitting the doors repeatedly. I hurried over and unlocked it, thinking he was in trouble and needed help. He quickly ran inside, and I closed and locked the doors behind him. The man was soaking wet and had pools of water draining from his jacket and spilling onto the floor. He didn't stop to thank me or explain himself. He just kept walking, back and forth, pacing across the floor. It was the same man I'd seen outside earlier. Had he been out there the whole time? It had been over 2 hours since I'd seen him. I tried asking if he was okay, and if I needed to call for help, but the man just kept pacing the floor with this blank, hollow look in his eyes. After watching him for a minute, I got really uncomfortable and started to walk to the front desk to call the police. As I picked up the phone though, his eyes snapped at me and he stopped walking. It was then, as we looked at each other, that I noticed his hands were cut, like right on the knuckles. They were bloody and bruised. I caught myself looking for too long, and by the time I looked back up at the man's eyes, I could tell he was pissed. "Don't," he said, clearly talking about me using the phone. I wasn't trying to test him, so I lowered the phone. There were a couple seconds where he just stared at me, like he was thinking about whether or not to do something. But then he turned and continued to pace the floor. The storm picked up outside, chaotically shaking the building and adding to the horror of whatever was happening. I tried to think out all my options as this maniac walked around just feet from me. I could try running, but I'd have to get the door unlocked and outrun him in the storm, which seemed really risky. I could also try calling the cops and hope he just leaves, but that was also risky. Funnily enough, I ended up choosing probably the most risky option, which was to do nothing and just wait. I stood there and watched him for, I don't know, 20 minutes at least. At any point, he could have just snapped and ended me, but he didn't. After those 20 minutes, he gave me one last look, then walked over to the door, slid the bolt lock over, and walked out into the storm. I immediately called the police. I'm not sure if it was just because of the storm, or because they didn't think it was urgent enough, but it took over a half hour for a cop to show up. By then, whoever the hell that man was gone. They never found him. When the storm finally passed on the following day, there was a report filed for a missing woman. She never returned home from work that night after leaving the office at 11 p.m. Maybe I'm just connecting completely different things, but the man had clear signs of having attacked someone with blood and bruises on his knuckles, and the timeline seems to add up. Again, it's all just theories, or whatever I was in the middle of that night, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. I was driving back from a late shift at work. I worked for security, so my hours were kind of all over the place. I'd gotten out at 1 a.m. this day. There was a pretty heavy storm going on. A lot of the roads had water building up on the sides, and almost nobody else was driving. The route I usually take is off the main roads on smaller, less crowded streets, and for some reason I failed to realize I probably should have taken the main roads this time. It's not like they were busy anyway. As I was using one of these small side roads, I came up to a point that was flooded. It was hard to tell exactly how high the water was, but it looked like it might be several feet deep, which I was not comfortable driving through. I knew this meant I'd have to drive all the way back, so I was pretty frustrated. I put my car in reverse and started to back up to do a 3-point turn when my car started frantically beeping. I hit the brakes, but didn't even know why it was beeping until I looked over my shoulder and out the back window. There was a car right behind me, like only 2 feet away from my bumper. It was almost like a jump scare, because not once during the 10-minute drive down this one-lane road did I see any cars in front or behind me, and their headlights weren't even on. I sat there for a minute. I thought they would see me backing up and move, or they would see the flooding road and also turn around, but they didn't do anything. They just stayed right behind me. The rain ticking against my car and my headlights being the only thing lighting up the road only made this feel more unsettling. Eventually, I honked a few times. The longer I sat there, though, the more I felt like something was seriously wrong about this. Then, their door opened. A man got out. He wore black clothing and had a hood covering most of his face. He came up to my window and knocked on it a few times. I didn't open it. The man didn't say anything. He just continued to knock on the window. This was so unusual and creepy, being that he was standing out during a storm on this empty road. I genuinely thought he had to be drunk or something. I decided to put my car in drive and try to inch forward, careful not to go too far into the flooded section. But the man followed right along my window. At this point, I was almost sure he was drunk, the way he was acting, not having his headlights on. I mean, he had to be. I was still nervous, but I thought I'd figured it out. Then, completely out of nowhere, someone knocked on the other side of my car. It was another man wearing the same sort of clothing, and behind him, I could see another figure approaching my car as well. I was stunned for a second, but realizing I was running out of time, I moved faster, being less careful about the flood and just trying to turn my car around as quick as possible. There was a moment where my car lost traction for a whole 3 or 4 seconds, and I thought I'd gone too far, but by some miracle, it came back to me. I managed to get around them and drive away. Obviously, once I was back on the main road, I called the police. They drove down to the scene later that night, and oddly, the car was still there, right by the flood, but none of the men were there. They were able to trace the car's owner down to some random dealership hundreds of miles away that it had apparently been stolen from months ago. I don't really know what happened on that road, or how close I was to something horrible happening. I probably will never know. My grandparents live in a small cabin up in Alaska, so I don't see them very often. But last fall, I made the road trip up there in my RV just to visit them for the season. A bunch of other family members snows flew in as well. As we got into October though, it started getting colder and the snow was supposed to be coming in, so I had to leave before the roads got too bad. The road that goes from Alaska and through Canada is famous for being extremely remote. There's no service along most of it, and it just goes through hills, valleys, forests, and mountains. Most people making the drive either sleep at the few truck rest stops or at public camping spots along the road. On my second day, I drove until 8 p.m. before finding a place to pull off for the night. It was a dirt road with a small spot between the trees to park and sleep at. I think a lot of people might find it unnerving to sleep in the middle of nowhere like this, but I did it pretty often in my RV, so I was used to it. I made myself something small to eat, then got in bed and turned on a movie to watch. It wasn't very long after I'd arrived though that I heard footsteps nearby. I sat up and opened one of the blinds, but I didn't have any exterior lights on, so my view was of nothing but the pitch-black woods. The footsteps sounded like they were from out there, but I couldn't confirm if it was a person or not. From what I saw when I pulled into this campsite, this was the only parking spot, but maybe there were more nearby that I didn't see. If it was a person, they had to have parked somewhere nearby, because there's no way they could have just been wandering around all the way out here. I thought about heading to the front of the RV and turning on the lights, but figured it best to just lay low. Maybe they didn't even see me and were just walking back to their campsite. Or again, it might have not even been a person at all. After a few minutes, everything seemed good and I continued watching the movie. I went to bed around 9:30, knowing I had to get up early to start driving again tomorrow. My eyes shot open to 3 loud knocks at the door to the RV. It was nearly too dark to see inside, so I switched on the reading light next to me. "I just need some water, please, and then I'll be on my way." It was a man's voice, deep, like they were older. My eyes looked at the clock. It was 2 a.m. If this guy really was out there in need of help, he had way more to worry about than just water. It had to be nearly freezing out at this time of night. "Why are you out here? How did you even get here?" I called out. There was a pause. My truck broke down just a couple miles back. Just looking for some help is all. I don't mean any trouble. My gut feeling was that this wasn't right. Everything just wasn't adding up. I snuck my way over to the other side window and tried to peek out and see him. It was extremely dark, but I could make out his figure standing right up to the door. I thought it was really weird how close he was, like he might be trying to listen in or even try to break in. But then I caught sight of something else. Behind him, I could see more figures moving around in the dark. Several, like at least 4 or 5. The man knocked again, almost banging on the door, as if he was losing his patience. I quietly backed up and grabbed the keys, then took a deep breath before running to the front and quickly turning the RV on. As soon as I did, the headlights lit up multiple men in front of me, all looking mid-30s and 40s with scruffy beards and raggy winter clothes. They started yelling as I drove past them and circled back to the main road. I drove until I reached a gas station. By the time I had service and got police involved, it was far too late for anything to be done. What those men were trying to do is anyone's best guess. This fall, I didn't make the trip up there, and I'm starting to doubt I ever will again. I'd already spent the whole morning and most of the afternoon with family, so now it was just time to go home and wind down for the rest of the night. Maybe watch a holiday movie or something. I drove 45 minutes from my parents' home to mine. The roads were empty, as you can imagine, and if not for it being Christmas, it would have actually been kind of eerie. Everything was so quiet, emotionless outside. Anyway, I got home around 8, pulling in the garage and heading inside. I flicked on the entrance light and immediately saw some papers spread across the floor in the hallway. It was all from a stack of mail I had sitting on the counter that I guess had fallen over. I didn't overthink it. I just picked it all back up and tossed it back on the counter. I did leave the house in a rush that morning, so maybe I ran past it and caused the pile to fall, and I just didn't notice. After cleaning it up, I walked around and turned on the rest of the lights, then went into the living room. I had a Christmas tree set up in the corner. It was one of those small fake ones that looked pretty sad, but it was better than nothing. I sat back on the couch and found a movie to watch, some new Netflix Christmas movie. It was actually pretty good. I watched the whole thing, but throughout the whole movie, I kept hearing something in my house. It was like quiet, almost inaudible creaks. I wasn't even sure if I was actually hearing it or not, because every time I'd think I'd heard something, I'd pause the movie and listen, but didn't hear it anymore. I took it as a sign that this Christmas day was over for me, as I needed to get to bed and sleep off the exhaustion of seeing all my family. I turned off the TV and all the lights downstairs and went up to my bedroom, walking in and turning on the overhead lamp. Without hesitation, I knew something wasn't right. I couldn't pinpoint what it was at first, but I knew my room was not how I'd left it. Something had been moved, and I quickly put all the pieces together of everything else I'd been experiencing since getting back home. My body felt numb, both fear and adrenaline taking over me. I walked back out into the hallway and looked down the staircase, trying to listen to see if whoever had been here was still here or not. I quietly went down, step by step, until I reached the bottom. There was no sound or motion at all. Is anyone here? I've called the cops. Hello? It was as I was saying that I realized my stupid mistake of not having called the cops yet. I started to go back upstairs, planning to lock myself in my room and call the police, when sudden footsteps rushed from the living room. It was too dark to see anything more than the Christmas tree branches swaying and a figure rushing away from it. I followed the sound into the kitchen and then the back door. They opened it and ran away. I was just standing there, frozen. Once I snapped out of it, I dialed 911 and locked the back door. I still don't really know what happened that Christmas night. Whoever had broken in hadn't taken much of anything, at least nothing that I really noticed. What I think is that they got in just as I was getting home, and once they heard the garage open, they probably sprinted through the kitchen, knocking over the papers, and hid. I know I saw them running away from the tree, but if they were hiding the whole time I was watching the movie, it wouldn't explain the noises I was hearing. Maybe there really weren't any noises, or it was something else entirely. The thought of them being right there in the corner of the room in front of me, waiting and watching me for 2 whole hours, is just horribly disturbing. I wish I had more answers and could tell you more, but that's everything I know. Police weren't of much help, and nothing has happened since. Hopefully, it stays that way. I'm nearing 30, and Christmas nowadays isn't as exciting as it once was. I usually take a trip down to whichever family member was hosting the get-together that year, and just hang out for the week, then go back home. It was always nice, but often there were just so many people that it was just a bit too chaotic for me. This was last year. I rented an Airbnb near my cousin's place, who was hosting the get-together. He lives kind of out in the middle of nowhere, so a lot of the options I had to rent were just small cabins. I chose one pretty much at random, and come a few days before Christmas, I drove out there. The first 2 days were actually really fun. I saw a lot of family I hadn't seen in years and enjoyed catching up. Then, even more people showed up, like maybe 30 people total, stuffed in a 3-bedroom house. It was a mess. On Christmas Day, we spent the morning watching the kids open their presents, then had a big breakfast. I hung around until dinner time, then called in for the night at 7. I drove back to the cabin. The place was nestled away in the trees, just outside of town. I thought the cabin was fairly nice though. When I pulled in and parked out front, I noticed shoe prints in the snow going up to the front door. I thought it had to be the Airbnb host, maybe wanting to check in on me or something. When I got up to the front door, it was clear they hadn't gone inside or anything. They just stopped, maybe waited for me to answer the door for a bit, then walked away. I went inside and tossed my jacket on the couch and sat in the sofa chair. I thought about texting the host to see what he stopped by for, but I figured if there was something important, he would have texted me, so I ended up forgetting about it. After only a few minutes of sitting down, I dozed off. It must have only been 10 or so minutes later when I woke up to a ring at the doorbell. I got up and walked over to the door, trying to rub the tired look off my face. I opened the door. There was a man with medium black hair and a brown jacket. He had a short smile and greeted me, quickly introducing himself as the host of the Airbnb and shaking my hand. I was still just trying to wake up, so I let him control the conversation while I just stood there and went with the flow. He asked me how my stay was and then explained that he just needed to check on a few things. Again, I was just nodding and too out of it to care about what he was saying. It was only after he walked past me and into the house that I realized I'd unknowingly agreed to let him in to check on some things. That almost immediately woke me up. He walked into the living room and kind of just stood there for a moment, looking around at the walls. It almost looked like he didn't even know what he was looking for. It was around then that I remembered it was still Christmas Day, which just made this whole thing even stranger. Why would he need to do this on the holiday? Couldn't he wait until tomorrow, or have come by yesterday? His strange behavior only made me feel worse. He was just slowly walking through the room, moving his head around and clearly pretending to be looking for something. The thought of him not being who he said he was began creeping into my mind. I was just so caught off guard by everything, and it being Christmas, I just wasn't expecting to deal with anything like this. Hey, do you think you could come by tomorrow instead? I've actually got a bunch of family that should be here any minute now. He stopped looking around and turned to face me. His face was stiff, and he looked almost angry at me for saying that. He then casually walked down to the front door as if he was going to leave, but instead he closed and locked it. That instantly sent a surge of fear through me. I ran straight into the bedroom and locked it behind me. The man ran up only a few seconds later and began trying to open it. I had no idea what to do. My car keys were still in my jacket on the couch, along with my phone. I knew that I needed to act now, though. I looked at the back of the room. There was an old window, one with a handle that you push open like a hatch. I hurried over, hearing the door behind me bend and crack with each hit as I squeezed myself out of the window. I then bolted for the tree line. He must have heard me leave or broken down the door right after I fled, because by the time I was in the woods and looked back, I saw him run out the front door. I was well covered by the dark though, and he didn't seem to know where I ran off to. He stayed out there for a while, like 20 minutes, before he finally got into his car and drove off. I waited an extra few minutes just to be safe, then ran back and got my phone, calling 911. During the investigation, the homeowner and Airbnb host came down, confirming he was not the one who stopped by the cabin. With this situation, there's not too much to go off of, so it can only be assumed that the man had found out that the cabin was an Airbnb and used that against me to get access to the place. His intentions after that aren't known, but it likely wasn't to just rob the cabin of its mediocre decorations. That night was a close call, and I don't think I'll ever be so trusting of anyone again. This was the first year I'd be spending Christmas alone. I think it sounds sadder than it was, but I couldn't afford the flight back to my hometown and couldn't take off any extra vacation time to make it worth it. Anyway, I always enjoyed seeing others' decorations and driving or walking around on Christmas Day. When I woke up, I turned on the old cartoon Grinch movie, made a nice breakfast and some coffee. Then I spent the next hour on FaceTime with my parents and siblings. After all that, it was probably around noon. I didn't have much else to do, but at some point I went out to get the mail, and when I opened the door, there were footprints in the snow on my porch. What's odd is that they were frozen over, like not freshly made in the powdery top layer of snow. They were clearly made hours ago, like overnight when it was well below freezing. I looked around, even though they clearly were not hearing, then went out and got my mail. It was very strange. I don't know if I felt scared, but definitely a bit unsettled. I didn't really know what to do about it, though. I tried to continue my day without worrying too much. After all, it was Christmas. I had some Hallmark movies play while I opened the gifts and letters that my family had sent in the mail. Around 3, I started getting bored and checked the weather. It was supposed to get a lot colder later in the day, so I decided to go for a walk around the neighborhood while I still had the chance. I bundled up and started down the sidewalk, looking at all the Christmas lights and taking in the calmness. A little bit into the walk, I noticed someone else walking in the neighborhood. They were the only other person I saw, and they were walking on the other side of the road. I thought nothing of it, but a few minutes later, they passed by me again. I did a double take, thinking I was seeing things, because there was no way we could have passed each other twice so soon, unless they turned around right after we passed each other the first time. I kept walking and came up to a split where I could either head back home or keep going around the neighborhood. I ended up going home. It wasn't because of the guy I saw. Sure, it was strange, but something else just felt off and made me want to head back. I went in through the front door, and eerily soon after I got inside, there was a knock at the door. I had only just taken off my boots and was still standing right by the door. My heart pounded in my chest like I knew this was bad. I looked out the peephole and saw a guy standing very close to the door, wearing a baseball cap tilted downward, covering his face. Weirdly, he seemed familiar. I didn't know why. At the moment, I thought it was just because he was the man I'd seen walking around the neighborhood. He knocked again. I knew he had to have already seen me enter. "What do you need?" I called out. They didn't answer. A few seconds later, they banged on the door again. I asked again what they were doing here and what they wanted, and watched out the peephole as he just stood there against the door and refused to answer or speak at all, before banging on the door again. He then grabbed the door handle and started shoving his whole body into it. I backed away as the whole door shook, rattling from its hinges with each blow. It went on for maybe 20 to 30 seconds, then it all suddenly stopped. There was a pause, and then multiple people yelling. When I went over and looked, there were 2 cops outside my home, arresting the man at my door. I was completely confused and unsure how this happened. I thought it was just some kind of miracle that they showed up at the perfect time. It turned out a neighbor had actually called the police and reported a man acting unusual, walking back and forth down our street for hours and standing outside my home. Even more disturbing though, I knew the man. He was an old ex from probably 6 years ago. He didn't even live in the same state as me anymore, and we hadn't talked at all since the breakup. It's scary to think that so suddenly, years later, he just decided to show up at my house on Christmas Day and try to break in. The cops found 2 knives on him, and in his car that he parked a few blocks away, he had a firearm and a whole roll of duct tape, both that he purchased just a few days prior. He admitted to nothing, but it's not hard to see what he was likely intending to do. When I got inside my car, the snowfall had just started. I knew the drive wouldn't be easy, so I wanted to reach home as soon as possible. I gripped the steering wheel as snowflakes swirled outside, blanketing the empty road in a silent white haze. To feel more alive, I turned on some music, but 15 minutes down the ride, the car shuddered, merging to one side as a sharp pop broke the silence. Damn it, I cursed, pulling over onto the desolate, snow-blanketed road. As I stepped out, my boots crunched on the icy ground. The cold bit deep into my skin. Just when I was trying to take in the feeling of getting a flat tire in this isolated road, I heard a low whistle. A shiver ran down my spine. I thought I was alone here. I grabbed the flashlight from my car trunk and inspected the area. That's when I saw it. A red Chevy parked under a tree at some distance. I checked my phone. It's 9 p.m. Why would someone whistle a romantic tune in such a desolated road? I wanted to stay in the car, but what if the owner of the car is close by and could help me with my flat tire? Thinking this, I began walking towards the sound. The whistle grew louder with each step, but its source remained unknown, always just beyond the next bend. I stopped near a big tree. Behind the tree was an open ground followed by the edge of the cliff. The starry sky was visible from there, and under the stars, I could spot 2 people sitting by a fire pit under a canopy. Wow, can people be this romantic in 2024? I couldn't help but roll my eyes. I looked closer and saw a man and a woman sitting under the canopy. The man had his arms around the woman, and her long blonde hair dangled over his arm. The man was whistling, whispering into her ears, and even chuckling. The night around them was eerily quiet, except for the occasional rustle of leaves. The stars above were brilliant, but the way he looked at them, wide-eyed and grinning, made my stomach churn. He leaned in closer and whispered into her ears. "You ever wonder if the stars are watching us?" he asked, his tone playful, but somehow wrong. "They see everything. They know everything," he chuckled. A low, strange sound that didn't belong in such a peaceful setting. The woman didn't reply, but he kept talking. "I told them about you," he said, his fingers absently tracing patterns in the air. "They're excited to meet you. Heh. His laugh was sharper now, almost giddy, like he was holding back some terrible secret. The cold crept under my skin as something felt very wrong about the entire situation. I was wondering whether I should ask for his help or not when I accidentally stepped on a twig. The snap broke the silence and the man turned towards me. In the faint light of the fire pit, I could see spots of something on his face and clothes. With trembling hands, I flashed my light on him. The light highlighted the streaks of blood smeared across his face and jacket too clearly. His eyes locked onto mine, unblinking, with a strange, hollow calm. A twisted smile tugged at his lips, as if he knew something I didn't. "Don't be scared," he whispered. Suddenly, he swiped his arm around the woman, and she fell back on the ground. Her face finally revealed to me, and I let out a scream. The woman's eyes were gouged out with something sharp. Trails of blood were frozen on her pale cheek. She has been dead for more than hours now. My boot crunched again as I slowly started backing away. The man got up too, retaining the same evil smile. And then suddenly, he sprinted towards me, his boots heavy and deliberate against the snow. I turned and bolted. My heart pounded so loud that it drowned out everything else. "Wait, I'm not gonna hurt you," he shouted, his voice harsh and much too close. I risked a glance back and saw him coming closer. I almost bumped inside the car and locked it immediately. The man stopped right next to my car window. Tilting his head to the left, he smiled at me and then raised a claw hammer to break the window. I swear, I have never seen death up close before. He struck the window and a large crack appeared. I almost knew he's going to kill me now. He raised his hand a second time and I knew the glass would give in this time when headlights brightened the road. A car was coming. He looked at the car and then looked at me. His smile vanished and with very angry eyes, he walked away, disappearing into the woods. I knew this was my only chance. I stepped out of my car, gathering all my courage, and stopped the car. An old man was driving it. I begged him to take me to the police station. He did. When I came back to my car with the cops, the red Chevy was gone, and so was the man. I led the cops to the place where I saw the body of the woman, but only the canopy and the dying fire pit laid there. No sign of blood or clues were there. The cops started investigating the guy for a week, but he was never caught. Neither the woman's identity was discovered. Sometimes I still wake up at night thinking he might be standing outside my window, waiting for one chance to silence me forever, just like that woman. Last Christmas, I booked this log cabin up in the mountains. After 3 hours of driving, I reached the secluded cabin that stood like a lone wolf in the snowy valley. Once I got down from the car, and I realized what silence can be. Other than the sound of a snowy breeze, I couldn't hear a single hint of life. Just when I was enjoying the view around, I noticed a man coming out of the cabin, holding a lantern. He was wearing an old sweater, ripped in places, with baggy brown pants that have seen better days. His eyes were big and surrounded with dark circles like he hasn't slept in years. Toro escorted me to the cabin. Nestled in a quiet forest, the old wooden cabin stood as a relic of simpler times. Weathered logs, moss-covered shingles, and a creaky porch told stories of countless seasons. Inside, the scent of aged wood lingered, and a stone fireplace offering warmth and a mystery. Showing me the kitchen and other needed amenities, Toro set out to leave. But just before closing the door behind, he turned to me. Sensing a worry in his mind, I asked, "Is there something else?" Toro looked outside. His tired eyes scanned the snow-covered woods and then whispered, "Do not go to the woods after dark." Saying this, he left in a hurry, like he wanted to run away from this place ASAP. I smirked, thinking how weird some people can be. He didn't need to tell me this, because no person with a sane mind would linger in the cold after sunset. I unpacked my stuff, took a warm bath, and then went to the kitchen to cook some dinner. As I sat to have my dinner on the table next to a large glass window, I felt a different kind of peace, something I haven't felt in a long time. I took a sip of the wine while watching the snowflakes dangling in the wind outside. The fireplace crackled with the burning woods. I was halfway down the dinner when the scream took place. Yes, a blood-curdling scream of a man in pain echoed outside. I almost jumped in fear. Someone's in trouble. Should I look outside? But Toro said, "Oh, forget what Toro said." The screams intensified, and I couldn't sit straight anymore. I slid right into my winter jacket and ventured out with a flashlight. The snowfall was getting heavier and it was getting difficult to see. I stopped under a tree and yelled, "Anyone out there?" The scream took place again. This time, very close, but it ended abruptly, like something choked the voice of the person screaming. With a racing heartbeat, I followed the direction from where the scream came. There was a bushy area behind a tall pine tree. Weird sounds were coming from there. I peeked in and could see a dark figure that seemed like a woman from behind, hunched over the ground. The sounds were of chomping. Whatever that figure was, it was eating. I should have turned back right that moment, but my curiosity got the best of me, and I flashed the light on the figure. My blood froze as I got a glimpse of a man lying on the snow. His eyes were gouged out, and his mouth was open wide with blood rushing down his lips. And near him sat a woman with long, black hair. She was eating flesh from his body. I could hear the crunching of bones and splatter of blood with her every charm. Suddenly, the woman looked back, noticing the flashlight on her. I have never seen a scary face like this. Her entire face was white like the snow. She had 2 black dots on her forehead, and the teeth were stained with blood. Her eyes were glowing like a hyena. A stream of blood was dripping from her mouth, and she smiled at me. I couldn't stand there anymore. I started running towards the cabin. My legs were shaking, yet I couldn't risk a fall. I could hear my heart beating in my throat. I was literally scared for my life. When I got in, I slammed the door and locked it. I was so terrified that the woman would follow me to the cabin that I secured the door by pushing the couch next to it. The entire night, I stayed in the living room, crouching next to the fireplace. All I could think of was the face and the wicked, bloody smile on it. I probably dozed off before dawn when I heard a slow knocking on glass. I opened my sleepy eyes and noticed the big window. The snowfall had stopped by then. Fading moonlight was glaring in the dim valley, and in that light I could see a figure standing outside my window. It was that woman from the woods. Her face was carved into a huge smile, and she was staring at me. I was horrified by the scene. I could hardly blink or move. I don't remember how long the staring competition lasted, but then the thin ray of sunlight hit the window and I fainted. I woke up hearing Toro calling out my name around 11 a.m. in the morning. I somehow carried myself to the door and opened it. He stood there looking at me with doubt and confusion. I didn't bother to clear his mind and just packed my things. When I handed him over the cabin keys before driving off in my car, Toro whispered to me, "You did see her, right? The white-faced woman." I fumbled in fear and drove off without waiting a second more. Till today, I try to think logically of what I saw and heard that night in those woods. But somehow, my mind gives up and all I end up imagining is that ominous smile. I wish I never went to that cabin last winter. I'm a fitness instructor, and my job compels me to take care of my body. I go to the gym thrice a week and I make sure to jog every day. Though since last winter, I go jogging in the evening since the city park is crowded at that time. And it's all because of what happened last winter. Usually, I prefer to jogging in the early morning since the park was secluded with less distractions and cacophonies of people. But something happened that made me alter my lifestyle forever. It was a foggy winter morning. I took a shot of Americano, followed by some Albans, and set out for a run. I jogged through the foggy, empty streets, my breath forming ghostly clouds in the icy air. Each footfall echoed faintly, swallowed by the surrounding silence. The shadows of leafless trees twisted and stretched, their skeletal branches reaching like ghostly fingers. The cold bit into my skin, but the rhythmic motion kept me warm. It took 20 minutes for me to reach the city park from my house. The city park lay draped in a thick blanket of fog. Bare branches of towering trees reached skyward like they're asking for warmth desperately. Frost covered the grass beds, shimmering faintly in the muted morning light. As I started running on the winding tracks, I couldn't help but think how these usually lively paths have drowned into the deadness of winter. Their curves disappeared into the fogs, creating mystery. The park benches were cold and damp. The distant outline of the park fountain emerged like a ghostly apparition. The air was crisp and heavy, and there was complete silence around. Not even a bird was chirping that day, which did come somewhat odd to me. At this point, I was cursing myself for not charging my earbuds last night. Running in that eerie quiet did make things uncomfortable, no doubt. 10 minutes into the run, I began hearing a weird sound. It was like metal rubbing against metal. The sound was getting louder as I moved ahead of the track. The fog in front of me got thinner, and I noticed the park swing. On the left swing, there was a woman. She was swaying back and forth, slowly. She looked wrong. Her messy, tangled hair hung over her face, and her pale, almost gray skin stood out in the dull light. She wore this tattered blue pullover with its sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Her pencil-thin hands with bony fingers gripped the chains tightly, making them creak with every swing. So this was where the sounds were coming from. The fog wrapped around her like it belonged to her, hiding most of her body. Every now and then, her head jerked slightly, as if she was stuck in a loop. It was unsettling. It was creepy. Now the track ahead went through that swing. If I continue, I'll have to jog and pass by her, which means she will see me too. Even though her behavior appeared frantic, she looked harmless. And I'm a pretty muscular guy, so even if she does something unexpected, I was confident that I'll be able to handle it. I increased my pace and ran to the swing's direction. As I passed her, I slowly turned my head to get a good look of her face. Surprisingly, she didn't even notice me. She continued swinging while staring at the grass. Her face looked blank, and her eyes were wide with dark circles around them. Thinking she must be going through a tough time, I felt bad for judging her too quickly. I ran past her, and then suddenly, the metallic creaking stopped. A bad feeling crawled on my skin. I slowly turned around and saw the woman wasn't swinging anymore. She is sitting still and staring at me. Something about her face had changed. There was a smirk on it, which looked terrifying. Then she spoke to me in a low but shrill voice. You know, Millie used to love swinging. She would beg me every day to bring her to this park. Even in that cold, I could feel sweat covering my forehead. I asked nervously, "Who's Millie?" She stared at me for a few more seconds, said nothing, did nothing, then suddenly started swinging real fast. She was swinging wildly while laughing like someone who just got possessed. Her maniacal laughter echoed through the foggy park. Her hair flew everywhere, and her eyes were wide like a crazed gleam. The swing groaned under her reckless movements as she kicked higher and higher, laughing like she'd lost her mind. And then it occurred, the loud metallic screech. Suddenly, the chains gave a sharp jolt and she flew off, slamming hard onto the frozen ground. The laughter stopped instantly. Her head twisted at a sickening angle. Her neck broke. She spit out some blood from her mouth, and then her body shivered for a fraction of a second. And then, the unsettling silence took over the park again. I was so shocked and horrified that it took me a few minutes to register what just happened. But when my senses finally kicked in, I dialed 911. The cops came and so did the paramedics. Her body was taken out on a stretcher, and I told the cops everything I could while shaking in that cold. People from the area were asked about her, and a few told her tragic tale. She had a 5-year-old daughter, Millie, who died of pneumonia recently. Not being able to survive the grief of losing a child, she took her last breath in front of me. It took me several nights to get sleep, because every time I closed my eyes, I could see her swinging and then breaking her neck on the hard concrete. I really wish she had someone to help her, so she wouldn't have given up on life like this.